Welcome to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
Jaimee, thanks for being on the podcast.
No problem.
Really appreciate it, particularly right now with what I kind of assumed you were just snowed under with the COVID stuff. It doesn't sound like you are.
No, I think different challenges have presented themselves.
Okay.
Just having to figure out how to still get our patients access to care safely.
Oh, okay. So how to give them care without getting too close in contact.
Yeah, or we even kind of redesigned the way the flow of the clinic even works. So, certain people come through a certain door and others through another door. We've zoned our medical assistants that only the IV nurses take care of the IV patients, the well medical assistants take care of the well checkups, and that the few sick that we have that we mostly keep outside curbside.
Okay.
And then we do telemedicine now. So I'm like jumping into rooms to do telemedicine, then into well rooms, then running downstairs to do curbside visits. And I can't forget the little kids' toys. It's
right.
We are jumping. So not necessarily like a rush of COVID patients, more so having to rethink the way that we do care with our patients in mind, which it's not super hard to figure out what to do when you just consider what your patients need. Mm-hmm. And we have an awesome, owner in Greg Garner who's always thinking through things like that. Like, what do the people need? And so it doesn't take, he thinks up this stuff overnight. It takes us a few days to go, okay, let's do this. But we have such a amazing, flexible team who all has, we all have very giving hearts and we all care about our patients a lot. So, we're kind of like a slow moving train. We're like, yep, gonna go. And then we just build up momentum and, so that's what's happening right now.
Well, we noticed that with you guys' ability to kind of be effective and efficient and be able to adapt, seem really good at that. That's probably the thing that Mariana mentions about the most that she appreciates. Like, I think one of the kids was over there recently. You rolled up in a vehicle and got treated, whatever needed to be treated, through the window, I guess, or something, and off she went again. Pretty cool. True. So that obviously is a reaction to COVID-19.
Yeah.
What was the other thing you mentioned with the online or the internet healthcare? What was your term for that?
So it's called telemedicine.
Yeah, telemedicine.
It sounds like a term from the 80s because it actually is. We haven't called it anything else, even though we are, several decades past the 80s. But it is a modality that was utilized in concierge medicine where, you can basically dial a doc. I think I was slow to get there because I really am old fashioned and I like patient interaction and I like to be comprehensive. And I think that integrative medicine is great and but almost needs to be accomplished when there's more even another level of trust. And I don't know that you can develop trust through social media platforms or telemedicine platforms. Yep. And so for me, it's really important to have those interactions so that in a moment, in a 2 a.m. phone call with a parent who's very concerned about their child, I can say something and they trust me.
Right.
And we can work through it together, but you don't get there without the face-to-face interactions. So I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, although I love telemedicine and I think it's something we for sure will continue with. If there's a silver lining of COVID, which COVID's awful, horrible, but if you look through for the silver linings, you're going to find them no matter what you're going through in life. Right. And so this silver lining is, I think, we are getting propelled into an era where we can even be more accessible to the patients that have established a rapport with us previously.
Yes.
So,
and I think not just healthcare. I think that's playing out in other areas too. In businesses, are realizing.
Yeah.
I think some businesses are just going to realize they don't have to pay what they were paying for fixed assets or office space or other things like that because they're able to work from. In this day and age, we can work from home relatively effectively if you have a space. I think that's the one. That is the one caveat. We have 5 kids and we don't have much space right now to work from home, so I still come here. But that, and then also churches are figuring out how to do this, how to get more involved digitally. And I don't think it means that, going forward, we just do church virtually, of course. However, there's a lot that a lot of churches can do digitally that they weren't before. And so I think there's going to be a lot of good byproducts.
The moms with new babies who need to stay at home, but still need a church service.
Right.
Still need that spiritual, awakening or boost when they're at home and postpartum and late up at night. Like they still need that, or our elderly population who sometimes can't get out. Like this is helping us even consider the least of these that might have been kind of left out of these platforms and forums.
Yeah.
So, I
totally
it's exciting
agree.
To a degree.
Our church, we just had John Farmer on here, one of the pastors at our church, and he's leading a prayer meeting multiple times throughout the day on Thursday, a prayer meeting on Zoom. And I've never been a part of a prayer meeting on Zoom before, but you know what? It can happen.
Yeah.
Stranger things have happened.
Yeah.
This is in some ways, I guess it's actually, well, I don't want to say it's good timing. However, we have homes to live in. Apparently some people or a lot of people don't even have to pay their water bill or electric bill right now. We have the internet. Like we have a lot of good things at our disposal to go through something like what we're going through right now.
And finding that gratitude is really important. It's honestly what keeps us alive in the long run. But at the same time, in the short term, having gratitude is really important for our immune systems. The moment you start kind of doing the woe is me, or I don't know, it's not woe is me, but it's really easy to kind of get into a downward trajectory when you start kind of like nitpicking at your situation, and you can that actually affects our chemistry negatively, even our immune system. And our immune system will not work as well when we are kind of in the throes of a dark place. And so speaking words of life, speaking gratitude, I know sometimes that can sound like, I don't know, cheesy or cliche, but it does something, and science supports that. But the Bible said it first.
Right.
So,
But see, I'm the first one that would be like, that sounds a little cheesy, because like the positive stuff, like, let's be honest, it can be a little overdone sometimes. Like it's not like the answer to every problem is not always just be more positive. However, there's never a bad time to be positive. So what is some of the science? Like what would be some of the negative effects of someone who's cynical, never gives anything the benefit of the doubt, very negative type thinking? Like, how does it go from the brain? To be
clear, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with, you have to have your cynic. Like, they play a very important role in society. They're the ones that are like, maybe we shouldn't eat that plant.
Right.
So they serve a purpose. But if you don't have anybody to balance you and you get into a very negative place, we actually know it creates acidity in the body. And that our T cells don't regulate as well.
What's a T cell?
A T cell is like a traffic cop. And it basically says, okay, all of you good white blood cells, come over here. Okay, yep, that's enough. Now you guys go over to this area, versus like an area like the lungs with COVID, we're talking about an inflammatory response. And that's the place where people get in trouble, is when they have too many white blood cells and too much of an inflammatory response going to their lungs. So it, shuts off airflow. And so that's when the traffic cop hasn't been able to communicate, or he's sleeping on the job or whatever. He's not doing his job when, the lungs are inundated with that inflammatory response. So it needs to be able to say, okay, that's enough. And really with any autoimmune situation, there's a little dysregulation there.
Okay.
And that's what we're kind of talking about.
Oh, okay. Now, COVID-19 is not necessarily an autoimmune disease, correct?
No.
It's respiratory.
It is respiratory. However, people who have or in the autoimmune category are going to have a harder time with it because their immune system is already not working correctly.
Yeah. And how do you define autoimmune diseases or issues? Because I feel like I hear it a lot, but I'm not really sure what the definition is.
Really, it's when the body continuously makes autoimmune mistakes. Okay. And for instance, oftentimes it begins with some form of damage to the gut, which is really important. That's where our immune system gets modulated, meaning it's given its different jobs, its different positions to play. And so, when damage happens there, which can be antibiotics, steroids, molds, vaccines, really any NSAID or chronically taken medication, stress. Stress is a huge one. Anytime any of that damage happens to the body, our body mounts like this inflammatory response. And the more times that it does that, then it can start to make some mistakes. And it can become what is called the autoimmune cascade if you don't cut off those things. Okay. Because those, once you get exposed to mold, or if you have food allergies or sensitivities, if you have them chronically and nobody diagnoses that and helps you overcome that and gets you on a path to healing, it'll be constant inflammation, constant immune response. And like I said, the more often that happens, then your body is primed to make other autoimmune mistakes. Okay. So thyroid is considered an autoimmune mistake. Diabetes, asthma, eczema, all of those are inflammatory conditions that can come about from undiagnosed inflammatory response somewhere in the body. Okay.
Now, the other thing I don't understand is when you say inflammation, where is the body being inflamed at that point?
So if we start back to where the gut is, there becomes this what's called gut dysbiosis, or maybe a more popular term is leaky gut. To where the gut is supposed to be this impenetrable kind of like PVC pipe that only lets certain things in and certain things out.
And by gut, are we talking about the stomach or the stomach and intestinal tract, like the whole deal?
The whole deal, okay. but primarily the small intestine.
Oh, okay.
I mean, this is where a lot of traffic happens with sending nutrients to the body, absorbing your minerals and your vitamins from your food. And unfortunately, what happens is anytime there's any sort of damage done to the lining of the intestine, it becomes permeable, and it gets kind of lazy. It lets things in and out that it shouldn't. And so bigger molecules, like say we're just going to take food. Say you eat a corn on the cob, and your gut is now kind of like a sieve. What do we call, is it called? Sieve? Yeah. And it lets corn like go into your bloodstream at that point in a bigger molecular form than it would have normally. Then the immune system says, you're not supposed to be here. What are you doing here? You're an intruder. Attacks it. When it attacks it, it makes an inflammatory response. So it sends a bunch of blood to the area with white blood cells to attack it and destroy it. But then that inflammation has to go somewhere. So, in our DNA comes into play. Everybody is going to react, respond. It's going to have a different effect on everybody's body based upon their familial tree and what kind of little chronic diseases are lurking in the family tree.
Fascinating. Yeah. Now, is this something that everyone has a little bit of, but it's worse for some than others? Or is this something where a lot of people or some people just don't even have it all, and then other people have it? Is it like an if or is it more like a scale that everyone has a little bit of?
I like to call it more of a puzzle piece because everybody has a different set of pieces that are making their puzzle. And so, you might have great genetics, but you got sick when you were a teenager and got lambasted with antibiotic after antibiotic after antibiotic, The doctors back then might not have known to put you on a probiotic and collagen and digestive enzymes and treat you carefully after that. And so then there became damage to your intestine, which was never tended to.
Just from the antibiotics?
Just from the antibiotics. And then, you know, in the United States specifically, people tend to have, well, not just the United States, in all cultures, you tend to eat the same things. So with repetitive eating and leaky gut, then those foods cross that, you know, barrier in the intestine, activate the immune system. You get more inflammation, which irritates the lining of the intestine even more. It becomes a cyclical issue. And then, you know, when your intestine isn't working well, you're not going to absorb your nutrients, your vitamins, your minerals. So then you start becoming depleted. Then more organ systems go, we can't handle this. Like we need nutrients, we need sustenance, and they start shutting down. So sometimes people start having pain, and then when they go to the doctor, you know, for pain, they're going to get pain medicine. They're going to get steroids.
Right.
They're going to get things like that. They're not going to be told, well, let's look at your diet. Let's look at your gut. Let's see what happened to you in the past. Treating the symptom
and not the cause.
So, but for me, I might have terrible genetics, and I might get one steroid shot, and that's all it takes, you know? So you do see what I mean? Everybody's puzzle is a little bit different.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, back to the inflammation again. Is that, I still don't understand what is being inflamed. Blood cells?
No, let's take another example. So if you sprain your ankle, you know, what happens is a lot of blood flows to the area. You notice that because of the swelling and the discoloration and the heat and the redness. Those are all signs of an inflammatory response. And so what's happening in that moment is all this blood is rushing to the area because it's trying to heal those ligaments. So, but that was an injury. There's like a point A and a point B, and it stops and ends.
Right.
There's an end to that inflammatory cycle.
Okay.
So once the healing is done, that inflammation stops. It did its job. It goes away. Okay.
Yeah.
There you would be, you know, going to an orthopedic going, what is wrong with my ankle? If it kept swelling for weeks and weeks and weeks and months and months and months, you'd be like, something's wrong. Well, we don't do that for some reason with other parts of our body. You know, if we don't go, okay, what's this inflammation coming from? We need it to stop. There's no end to the inflammatory cycle that's trying to heal the intestine, because we don't identify what the primary offender is.
Yes. Okay. So how does this inflammation manifest itself? Do you feel some pain? Do you feel discomfort?
So,
do you feel tired?
Yes, yeah, a lot of times it starts just like you would when you are sick. So people will get diarrhea or constipation, or they will feel nauseous, very fatigued. They'll have brain fog. Often there'll be an expression on their skin like eczema or psoriasis. In their lungs, they'll have a lot of allergies, or they'll have asthma. Pain, like we mentioned, migraines is a big one. You know, and then, you know, those are just the initial things. Then come the onset of other, you know, more chronic conditions. And the reason that we call it an autoimmune cascade is because if you never go back to the root problem, you know, you're just going to keep on having additional inflammatory responses happen in different organ systems in your body. And then you're on 10 medications.
Yes, you know? Absolutely. And in this scenario that you just laid out, is the root cause, the root problem, the leaky gut?
No, it's not. Leaky gut isn't the root. And I think that's the misconception. It's everybody's like, let's go back just to the leaky gut. It goes beyond that.
Okay.
And so, you know, back to what I talked about with antibiotics. For patient A, you know, that is their root cause. It started with antibiotics. Or, you know, patient B, it might have been the steroid shot, or someone who lived in a moldy house and didn't know about it. Or, you know, we could keep on layering these things. Parasites, that's often a root cause for people. Stress believe it or not, can be a root cause for some people. I have done the gamut on tests on some of my patients and literally had to come to the conclusion, oh my gosh, you are this stressed, it's killing you. And back to the happy attitude, you know, and what that does to our body and our chemistry. They literally had such a difficult job that it was causing their insides to not work properly to the point they weren't absorbing anything, and it was so inflamed. So yeah, I think erroneously some people think leaky gut is the root cause, but you have to keep on going beyond that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now let me ask this then. So is leaky gut one of the most common denominators of autoimmune diseases, or like can you have an autoimmune disease without a leaky gut?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a big issue, because if you're going to have autoimmune issues, whatever they are, you are going to have a leaky gut.
But I can't help a patient with their leaky gut if I don't find out which of those other root causes is driving their leaky gut.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. How would you go about diagnosing that?
It's a combination of listening to their story, which I think is so important, which is one of the hallmarks of integrative medicine. We take time to listen to the story. A lot of integrative docs actually make their patients almost write what feels like a small novel. It's almost like 20 pages of intake paperwork, you know, detailing everything. And I don't think that's wrong to do. I don't personally do it. I like to hear the story.
Yep.
But that's a matter of preference, I think, at that point. So I listen to their story and combine it with the symptoms that they're experiencing. And then, you know, budget is a consideration even more now that so many people are unemployed. I don't just like subjecting them to the 10 tests that would diagnose them. You know, I try to pinpoint like, maybe we should check for parasites and food allergies and start there. You know, if everybody had unlimited funds, my job would be pretty easy. I would just take a bunch of samples and then we'd be done. But it's not when you have several kids, and not when you are out of work, and you know, not when real life happens.
Right. In 2020.
Yes.
I was going to say something about the antibiotics. That can take up to 2 years to really flush through, right? It takes some time.
So I'm going to pick on your terminology there. It actually flushes through really quickly, meaning all of your good bacteria, you know, get flushed down the toilet very quickly.
Okay.
It can take 2 years to rebuild your microbiome, because we have a very much under the sea environment going on in our intestine with over 500 different species that we know about so far, that all play a different role. Like every single one of those bacteria have a different job. Some of them regulate serotonin and dopamine and norepinephrine and all of your mood. You know,
from the gut.
Some of them are supposed to digest specifically dairy. Some of them are supposed to digest specifically gluten. Some of them help you sleep. Some of them help you think. You know, every one of them has a job to do. And if they're missing when you know, are given an antibiotic, and antibiotic, that means anti-life. It kills off the good bacteria. Then you're left without those functions.
Yes.
Yeah. So it can be very problematic. And yes, you're correct. It can take up to 2 years to get that microbiome to a place where it's thriving again.
Yep. And so in that case, you're just using antibiotics as little as possible. And then if you do need to use antibiotics for something, try to get on some probiotics. And what else?
I suggest collagen to kind of stick back together that leaky gut. It kind of acts like glue. You have to be careful though. Some people have a little known allergy called alpha-gal, and it's a little bit more common here in Tennessee. When you've been bitten by a Lone Star tick, it actually gives you a sensitivity to all red meat. And it's a very deep dark hole, so we don't need to get further into it. But essentially, if you have that allergy, you will be wanting to supplement with chicken broth and marine collagen, not necessarily beef or pork.
Okay. And
so collagen, digestive enzymes. Digestive enzymes are super important. Think about, a slower paced lifestyle where, people were in the kitchen smelling smells, tasting things long before they actually sat down to eat. Those smells and tastes would actually trigger the production of digestive enzymes in their stomach and even in their mouth, that you start tasting something. Yeah. And then you would sit down generally and eat slowly and laugh and converse. And it would be, by the time that food reached your small intestine, it would be broken down quite a bit. Well, in this day and age, not only are we not cooking every meal, or sometimes not any meals if you grab and go, then you're not part of the process. Your body doesn't produce the digestive enzymes. You eat very quickly. At that point, your intestine has quite the large job to do. And over time, it can become irritating. Yeah.
So where did we go so wrong, if you will, with our lifestyles, how we treat food? It seems like it's such a common problem. Like very little of what we sort of have now in 2020 in America is like conducive for good health. Like you have to think differently than what you're being marketed for the most part. When did this shift really happen? Was it in like the 1900s? Or are we talking like would you go even beyond prior to this?
Well, man, I have to be careful with what I say here. I am not advocating here that women cannot be in the workforce at all. Obviously, I am a woman. I'm a mom, a wife. I'm in the workforce. But really, truly, when women really joined the workforce, there was less cooks in the house, and, a lot less grocery shopping. That's when Campbell's and Betty Crocker got really big. And I don't know if you've ever seen a Betty Crocker cookbook, but it literally will say things like, now you take this Campbell's can of mushroom soup, and basically naming processed foods in a cookbook.
Oh, wow. You know what? I forgot about Campbell's canned mushroom soup.
Yes.
We had that. You probably have never had. It was really good, actually. I had totally forgotten about Campbell's canned mushroom soup.
You put it over your string beans and then the crunchy onions.
Yes, you do.
Yes, you do.
I had this as a kid often.
Yes.
I'd forgotten about it.
But it was one of the first moves to start talking about processed foods as if it was a real food ingredient. Why? Because we had busy moms who weren't, you're not going to make mushroom soup if you've been working all day. I know I personally have to get very creative and, sometimes staying up late. And some days, I have really good friends and a really good babysitter who gets me to my end goal. I don't know that every family has that, and I do see some of these moms who come in postpartum or with several kids and they are stressed out. And it's because I think we're holding moms to this standard that's almost impossible, where it's like, have this career, be very busy, yet keep your home perfect, your kids fed with all this organic home cooked nutrients. And I don't know one person that can hold themselves to that level. I don't. I have help.
Yep.
So
now, even with your help, do you struggle with guilt? Because you know a lot about health. And so do you ever struggle with this mom guilt because you are busy and you work but you'd like to do even better?
Yeah, well, for sure. For sure. I find though, that's when I haven't voiced a need and I'm like, I need to do this all myself.
Okay.
If I'm not being honest with those around me, then I probably struggle with it a little bit more. But my kids are getting to the age where they're really helpful. Mm-hmm. And that didn't happen overnight, so for anybody out there is like, oh, my kids don't help you. I mean, I'm talking about my older ones. I think they're 9 and 10. That's how they are. Yeah, they're 9 and 10. Yeah. And they are extremely helpful. Evie at this point is making sourdough for us. I don't even make it anymore. And
Evie makes sourdough bread.
Yeah, she does.
Lincoln, that's your next challenge, my man. He's actually getting pretty fluent in the kitchen.
I mean, I think he could. It's very easy. It's mixing 4 ingredients. That's it.
Wow.
So, I'll share some starter with you, Lincoln. Okay,
that'd be great.
And Jonah helps with the kefir. Isley goes and gets the eggs. I mean, they all just do a job, and I often tell them, I say, okay, you guys, your mom's a nurse practitioner. That means you have way more responsibility maybe than normal. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Maybe other households run like ours, but I put it on them. I'm like, you have no choice. This is how our house works. Yeah. So I know it can be done, Yeah,
totally. And you have the right. I mean, you literally brought them to this world. You put a roof over their heads. You give them food. They could work a little bit.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on the carnivore diet as it relates to autoimmune disease, leaky gut, healing some of that?
I do think that I think it's real. I think it works for some people. I think I would be remiss if I said it was for everybody. But again, we're not all created, with the same DNA. Mm-hmm. And there's actually a really cool test from one of my favorite labs called MaximizeGenetics.com. They do a cheek swab, and they have several different genetic tests, but my favorite is a test that actually shows you what foods are optimal for you. I mean, it'll be like, you do better on avocado oil versus olive oil, like down to the nitty gritty. Or you do better with vegetables, or you can't absorb this from food, So, some people have a genetic predisposition to do better on certain diets. Mm-hmm. I think even my patients and colleagues who are, supporters of carnivore would even acknowledge that. Right. That it's not for everybody. But at the same time, I do think that, people can sometimes be closed-minded to new diets or new fads. Mm-hmm. But we can't put people in a box.
Totally.
And I think that it's interesting. Some people will have nothing to say when someone's on ice cream and pizza and Burger King. And the moment they say, I'm on grass-fed organic beef, all of a sudden people have a problem with it. Right. It's kind of sits interesting.
Yeah. And the flip side too, like someone goes vegetarian and some people have a problem with it. Mm-hmm. It's like, but it's totally cool to be eating Chick-fil-A and drinking a bunch of coffee and having some snack,
I think we're interesting as human beings that when someone else tells us that they're doing something, that somehow they're putting it on us, and the expectation is we need to partake too. Yep. And that's not what people are saying all the time. Right. I know some people can be more, I don't know if the word is charismatic or excited about what they're doing, but that's not the majority of folks. Yeah. And sometimes when people are sharing their excitement, it's literally because they're just looking for human connection and want somebody to share it with, not just because they expect you to do that too. Right. So,
yeah, I don't have much experience with the carnivore diet, but I had a friend whose wife had some pretty significant kind of autoimmune issues, and they went full carnivore for a month or two. Mm-hmm. It might have been more, but and so I tried it for 7 days. I felt really good on it. I liked it. It felt good, but it didn't seem like, well, one, it's a little bit expensive, and you want to, if you're going to do that, you need to be eating good meat. Like you don't want to be eating a bunch of processed stuff. So it's not cheap, and then you're eating something that's different from what the rest of the family's eating, which is always a pain. But also it just feels like, man, it doesn't feel advisable unless there's a good reason to. Like it didn't feel advisable to miss out on all these good foods unless there's a good reason to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that the people who are turning to carnivore have specific goals in mind.
I think so.
And, maybe you can even call it a medicated type of diet where they're literally kind of trying to reverse a process metabolically. And so, I think I'm not gonna dissuade anybody from doing it, especially if it's helping them. Now,
what is the science behind that, using that for leaky gut or autoimmune? When you say reverses a metabolic process, do you know anything about the science behind if you just eat meat, what this does to your body and how it helps?
Some people have microbiome issues to where fiber from vegetables actually makes things worse. Mm-hmm. And that's a situation called SIBO. It's very complicated. I guess the nuts and bolts of it is what I just said, that it can make gas and bloating and pain and constipation even worse, because it's basically like throwing salt on a wound, I guess. You're just scraping an area with fiber that's already irritated.
Right.
And already, is SIBO is where you have a particular bacteria that has taken the opportunity to overgrow all the others. And so when you're feeding it fiber and different things, you're just making a monster stronger.
Right. Yeah.
So, when you do meat, there is a lot of nutrient density to that. And the collagen that we talked about earlier can be very healing. Mm-hmm. I just did a carnivore supporters labs last week, and they were wonderful.
Okay.
Thyroid was balanced when it's been crazy before. D was wonderful. Cholesterol was great. All of these other markers that we look at, magnesium, iron, and these are the markers that we look at to see if somebody's absorbing their food or not. Mm-hmm. They were.
This person was on the carnivore diet, and all of the main markers were looking good.
Yeah.
What about, is it not a misconception that salt gives you cholesterol? Or is that accurate? Too much salt gives you either, is it cholesterol or high blood pressure?
It's high blood pressure.
Okay.
And the reason being is because salt and water are friends, and anywhere salt goes, then water is going to follow. Mm-hmm. And so it becomes problematic if you have stiff veins or cholesterol lined veins, which again, we're actually looking at heart disease as an autoimmune inflammatory issue. Because when your veins get irritated and there's inflammation, they expand and crack and kind of break a little bit, and they form scabs and they get sticky and tacky. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't really matter whether you have if you have low cholesterol, really any amount of cholesterol that's going to go through your body is going to stick to those veins.
Okay.
So like we can look at Eskimo civilization or tribes, and they eat whale blubber.
Yeah.
Legit whale blubber. And their cholesterol levels are beautiful. Why? Because they don't eat inflammatory foods. They don't have inflammatory processes. And so their veins are right as rain. And literally nothing in there sticky or tacky to hold on to that lipid, that large amount of lipid.
I see.
So really, actually, if you look back historically, cholesterol became the bad guy because sugar companies literally, I mean, this is getting a little conspiracy theorist, but sugar companies hired scientists to point the finger at cholesterol. And really is the sugar causing the inflammation and the sticky, tacky veins and arteries and cardiac valves.
Yep.
So
interesting. Would you rank sugar as one of the biggest?
Terrible. I'd rank it as terrible.
Okay. So if you survey kind of the landscape now, is sugar at the top of your list of the silent killer that's out there in everything? Everyone's addicted to it. Yep. That's, speaking in broad categories, painting with broad strokes, but still, would you rank sugar at the top?
Absolutely. And it's really interesting. You can look at a brain scan and it would look similar to When you crack cocaine, sugar will light up the brain in the same areas. So its qualities are as addictive as crack cocaine. That's why, none of us really want to have the conversation about giving it up.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, once people do, they actually feel a lot better. It's just hard to maintain in our society. I did it, I think in January, for I think close to 60 days. And it's difficult to maintain because like even condiments have it in it. Cans of
ketchup,
beans,
a lot of ketchup and has a lot of sugar.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I only did mustard, which you have to find sugar-free mustard too. But it's just, you can't necessarily go out and not be exposed to it. So it starts to feel a little legalistic,
Sure. Yep.
But yeah.
Well, one of the things that's frustrating to me about the sugar thing is it's like, man, it's so hard now. Like, guys, do we have to make it this hard? Like, I do want to be healthy. I do want to eat clean, but golly, it's hard. Like, you have to know these things. I wouldn't have known that ketchup had a lot of sugar in it without Mariana. Like, there's a lot of this stuff I would have no idea if I hadn't so happened to marry Mariana, who's interested in these things. Yeah. Like, it's not common knowledge. You have to search it out. But speaking of sugar, this book is pretty fascinating. Food of the Gods. The first half, I mean, it's the first half is maybe not so helpful, but it's all about drugs, quite frankly, plants, human evolution. But it talks a lot about, in the second half, it talks a lot about particular commonalities that go with like dominator type societies. So it's why, there's no dominator society better than I think what we have right now in America.
Right.
And so what's very common, sugar, very common, caffeine, very common, tobacco, very common. Like those things are accepted. They're not just accepted. They're like, they are pushed somehow. Like you're kind of cool if you have a cigar with a bourbon while you're at your country club, but you're a freaking hippie if you're smoking a joint, and there's these things that are like not just accepted with certain societies, but like promoted. And sugar is absolutely one of those things. This gets into how sugar and the slave trade was actually tied together as well. It's a fascinating history.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't know, don't care. But even for people that do know a little bit and care a little bit, like myself, it's hard to eat right. I mean, it just is.
It is.
What do you do about stress? You mentioned stress can be a cause of leaky gut. Does someone, if they have a stressful job, do they need to quit that job? If someone's life is a little stressful, do they need to change it? Or is there things you can do to mitigate stress and keep your job if it happens to be stressful?
Yeah. I had someone quit their job last month and they've never been doing better, and they kind of did it out of move of faith, but specifically because their body literally couldn't handle it anymore, So, some people, you have to weigh success, I think, with health. And some people can have both. I think it honestly depends a lot on your economic status to begin with, what you can afford to do or not do. I think being intentional is really important. Like most people should be engaging in some form of mindfulness or spirituality to ground themselves. I know I do. I know the weeks that I don't, I'm very much in a funk. My friends very much ask what's wrong with me. I have to maintain a certain level of spirituality to do what I do on the constant, because I deal with people's stress and anxiety and real terrible life situations all the time. And, hearing that all the time, it should, it affects you. And so a certain level of intentionality and spiritualness, I think, goes a long way. I I don't really feel like this stay-at-home order really affected me too much because I am finding that's what I do on the weekend anyway. I stay home with my kids. We garden. We're outside. We're foraging. We're touching things. We're in nature. We're putting our feet in water and putting our feet on rocks and grounding. Quite literally because we enjoy it. I mean, I do tell them every once in a while the science behind what we're doing, or even biblically, theologically, what we're doing is what God intended for us to do, to connect with the ground. We sing, we do worship songs. The kids are becoming very musical. I have a historically very musical family, is even handed down to me. So I take those things as blessings, as very rich heritage that those things were handed to me, because honestly, they help me continue to do my job.
Yeah.
My mom was huge into making us memorize tons of scripture. I literally had the entire Sermon on the Mount memorized. Matthew's chapter 5, 6, and 7, and 8. Literally.
No way.
The whole thing.
Oh, wow. How much of that could you recall today?
Oh, let's not do it right now. It's the end of the day. But I probably quite a bit.
Really?
Yeah, probably.
Oh, wow.
Because, she had us memorize, just say it over and over and over. We jump on a little trampoline and literally.
What age were you?
I think I was 8.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's when she started all that. But she was a teacher, and she just every day we were memorizing something. And so, I have that playing in my head constantly, and it definitely gives me, not only metaphorical light, but actual light in moments of darkness. Because my job can be dark. So I don't think everybody needs to quit their job. I think you can search for the light in situations like that, and Bible says if you look for him, you're gonna find him.
Yep. Exercise really helps me. I think that's just the way my body's wired, but exercise really does help with stress.
We were made to move.
We were. I'm really fascinated by the leaky gut stuff, because I do feel like I deal with that, and I know it seems like a lot of people that deal with what they think is
we have what we affectionately call the SAD diet, which is the standard American diet. And you brought up sugar and not knowing what it's in. It's because the food industry has, they're evil. They come up with 50 different names for sugar, and it's not
high fructose corn syrup.
Well, not even just that. I could literally give you a list of gibberish that sounds like it came out of a Harry Potter book. And you're like, that's sugar? I never would have thought that was sugar. And so, they do their best to rename things. Even natural flavors is not natural flavors. It is a chemical that they named natural flavors. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not natural flavors.
Wow.
They would name the flavors if they were actual flavors. FDA doesn't.
It's absurd.
So, FDA is Food and Drug Administration, and they don't care. Like they could care less. Half of them have stock in some of these companies.
Right. That's the thing. Yeah.
And so it does, like you said, take some navigating. And I've enjoyed Mark Hyman's wife. Her name's Mia Lux, I believe. And she's a comedian, actually. So an integrative nutritional comedian. It's really, she's really funny. And
can you find her on YouTube, or where do you see her stuff?
You can. Now, just keep in mind, I'm trying to remember where she's from. Either Ireland, I want to say Ireland, and so, or New Zealand. And so she does use a few choice words.
Sure.
And that you don't want to say in church, right? So, but she does this really funny bit about how they really should, they mislabel things here. So for instance, the grass-fed beef, the first time she came to the US, she was like, Mark, what's grass-fed beef? And he's like, well, cows that eat grass. And she's like, that's all they eat. And he's like, no, honey, here they're fed literal SHIT. Like they're fed that and corn and steroids and all this, like even chopped up other cows, you know? And so, you know, she said, well, the food industry needs to, you know, be subjected to a relabeling, where that meat needs to be labeled as such and be like, yeah, you can have a really cheap piece of meat that was fed all this stuff and here's the label. And then this other grass-fed beef should just be called beef.
Right. Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you're right. It's frustrating in our day and age because there is so much corruption and, you know, deceitfulness.
Yep.
And you're right. It's hard to navigate. I'm really hoping for something more for our children.
Right.
You know, so.
Yeah. I mean, one can dream, but also that's not going to fix anything. Like dreaming isn't going to fix it. Like enough of people wanting the change and taking action is what's going to fix it. And I feel like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a lot more awareness with this stuff now than there was 20 years ago. So if we can continue on that trajectory.
I don't know. I don't know if we're the minority though. You know, I don't know if the majority of the United States is aware, or I guess the new term is woke.
Right.
You know, to what's really happening. You have to have a critical eye that understands the way that the world works, and that's painful to realize for some people. I think some people would prefer to not live in that reality.
Yep.
And I don't blame them.
Sure.
But it's too late for me, maybe too late for you.
Right. Yeah. How about, as it relates to leaky gut, if someone doesn't feel good after they eat 80% of the time, 70% of the time, is it maybe because they have a leaky gut or because they're eating foods that they are sensitive to or allergic to?
Yeah. So a little bit of those terminologies are the same thing. Leaky gut, creates, remember, that environment to where that food can pass that membrane and then the immune system reacts to it. And so, yes, part of healing a leaky gut is identifying the foods that a person has become sensitive to and allergic to, and you eliminate them for a time. And that time is different for everybody. Some people only need a couple months. Some people need a couple years to avoid those foods and do the things that I had said, like the probiotics, the digestive enzymes, the collagen, and the rebuilding of that microbiome to where they can add those foods in moderation again.
Okay.
And so, you know, we're creatures of habit. So a lot of people that I test I find them that they're sensitive and allergic to either the top 12 or top 20 things that I test for. And work with a really great company that does not cost an arm and a leg. It's $5 per food, which I really feel like is very fair. I've had people come from all over states to me that have been, oh my gosh, spent thousands of dollars on these tests. And I'm like, why? You know, like, why is this? This is a very simple blood test. So $5 per you know, food is I think reasonable, and we can get at least a good picture into your gut, and if you are reacting to a lot of things or you're not. And so if you test for the top 12 things that people are, you know, generally allergic to and sensitive to, and you don't test positive for any of them, there's no point in testing for, you know, a couple hundred different other things.
Right. Yep.
So I like working with them. They kind of remind me of Albert Einstein. They're two older gentlemen that are very, very smart. And their names are Gary and Jay. And boy, do they care about our patients quite a bit. So
and they do the testing.
They do the testing in a small little lab in Franklin, and they have thousands of patients, and you would never think their technology fits into the small building that they're in.
Really?
But it does, and it's very neat.
So somewhere in Franklin, Tennessee is Gary and Jay,
Yes.
a couple of older Albert Einsteins, collecting all these blood samples from all over America or maybe even the world, and doing their little magic to it and then letting you know what they're allergic to.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome.
They're incredible dudes. And we always go out and they teach us something new and treat us to lunch, and they're great guys. They're just wonderful.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I need to have Gary and Jay on the podcast.
Yeah. Their company's called Allermetrics.
Okay.
And I've used them for 5 years now, and really do love the results that patients get when we test with them.
This other one you mentioned, maximizegenetics.com, is that something that people go to the website and send in a sample, or do they need to go through you?
They can do both.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Either way.
Yeah.
Okay. What are they sending in?
They're sending a cheek swab.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets enough of the DNA to figure out what's...
Yeah.
Golly.
Yep.
You can tell what's going on with someone's body by taking a little saliva from your cheek.
Yeah. Well, you're getting their cells. You're getting their cells off of the cheek, which is your DNA.
Okay.
And your DNA never changes. So what's nice about these results is that these results are going to stick with you for life. Mm-hmm. Whereas the allergy sensitivity test, I mean, that can change depending on what has happened in your life, if you've done some gut healing or not. They recommend not testing for allergies and sensitivities any sooner than 3 years apart. So, because it does take that amount of time to really make a difference or make a change.
Yep.
But as far as the DNA, it's a one-time deal, and it'll never change.
Now, if someone's thinking, okay, I hear you, but I just know deep down, like, I'm always going to feel a little sick, or my stomach's going to always feel a little bloated, or I'm always going to feel a little bad after I eat food. Like, I get it. I can probably make it a little better or whatnot, but that's how I've always been. That's how I'm always going to be. Mm-hmm. Is that true for some people? What would you say to that?
No, food's supposed to make you feel good. It's supposed to make you feel alive. It's supposed to give you energy. If it doesn't do that, then I'm thinking one of three things. Either the food is bad, you don't have the tools to digest it, or there's been damage done to the organ system that it's going through. Mm-hmm. You know? So obviously, if we take a plant, you got this plant right here, and well, it's a fake plant.
Yeah, we won't get far with that one.
It just took me 2 seconds to realize I'm looking at fake bamboo. Okay, well, let's just say it's real, okay? Yeah. And we say it starts to wilt, and we don't take the attitude of, well, that's just that plant, or that's always just going to be like that. We immediately go, okay, well, does it have enough sun? Does it have enough water? What's in the water? Do we need to give it some more minerals? Does it need more nitrogen? We immediately start looking at the soil, like, what's wrong with the soil? We don't do this with human beings. We immediately are like, well, something's wrong with them, right? You know, yep. And we don't necessarily go to the environment, yep. Which every biological thing in the universe reacts to their environment. Yep. And so it's funny to me that that's such a hard step for even medical professionals to take. Yep. Well, let's look at your environment. No, we're just going to prescribe you this pill. Right. You know, it doesn't, yep. It's very short-sighted, and, yep. You know, I'm not going to say we don't ever use medication. I use medication, and I respect it, you know, but it seems interesting to me that that's just a step we often miss, or don't think is as important or valid for some reason. Yep. So, well, 150,000 people a year die from overdosing on prescribed medications. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 150,000 a year. Yep. I think that's globally. I don't think that's just in America, but that's prescription medications. It's crazy. Mm-hmm. What about depression related to gut issues? Yeah. And this is a topic that's really close to my heart, because I have so many people come in with depression and anxiety, and even children. And it's becoming, more and more kiddos. I mean, 10, 11, 12, not even, you know, they haven't even technically gone through puberty yet. And they're dealing with really dark thoughts and, you know, just concepts they really shouldn't be dealing with yet at that age. Mm-hmm. I think that the world is a much more hostile place to live in now than maybe when you and I were kids in that age. So that's part of the component. But another thing is that, remember back to that microbiome where all of those bacteria have a different job to play. And, you know, those scientific terms, norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin, all of those things regulate whether we're happy or we're sad.
Yeah, that's what triggered when you mentioned serotonin.
Yeah, and
dopamine.
Mm-hmm. And so what can happen is if you get that antibiotic and it completely clears your system out and you no longer have those players, then you're not going to regulate well. And they did a study on some prison inmates where they had a lot of schizophrenic-like symptoms, and they were on lithium, low-dose lithium, to kind of help with the presentation of those symptoms. And this study, I'm like, why is this not like broadcasted everywhere? This is like life-altering information. But they took them off of one half of them off of gluten and off their lithium, and then they kept the other half on lithium and let them eat whatever they wanted. And did you know the schizophrenic presentation pretty much disappeared on the cohort that they took them off of lithium and gluten? And so, how do we talk about this practically? Like, how do we make this people understand what we're talking about? Okay, so when you're going to give a speech, you might feel like you have butterflies in your stomach. When you get delivered bad news, you feel like you get punched in the stomach. Mom's home cooking just makes you feel nostalgic and happy and comfortable. Maybe, let's see here, I'm trying to think of another thing. Maybe when you're going to perform a song or something like that, you have to go to the bathroom because you have the runs. Our intestines are very visceral and very connected to our emotions and what we're feeling and thinking. When people are in car accidents and hit their head or fall and get concussions, we immediately see things like constipation and bowel problems happen next, because our brain and our bowel are pretty much the same tissue. We call the intestine the second brain. Yeah. And I think it's around 85% of the neurotransmitters that are in the brain are also mirrored or housed in the intestine as well.
Wow, that's amazing.
And so you think about everything that we just talked about, and if all the neurotransmitters that affect our emotions and affect our mood are, directed in the intestine, then it becomes apparent why there's so much anxiety and depression on our sad diet.
Right.
Standard American diet.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, wasn't the seat of the emotions in the Bible times, wasn't the seat of the emotions basically your gut? Like it wasn't your heart. Like we think now, like I love you with my whole heart. I think back then it was more like, it would be more accurate of us saying now, like I love you with my whole gut.
Yeah.
So that was like the seat of the emotions, which is probably more medically accurate than it being the heart. If what you're saying
that's true.
Is true. So, when you say depression is near to your heart, is this because you have close family members? Is this because you have close friends? Is this because you see it so much? Why is it near your heart?
You hit on all of them. It's all the above. And I think it's because it can, there's just nothing like depression. It can just weigh an entire household down. And, when I see patients, I don't see patients. I see family units, unless they really are single. And even then, there's probably going to be a mom or dad in the equation that is affected by their child, even if it's an adult child. But yeah, I don't feel like I treat patients. I treat families. And when one person in the family is struggling with depression, it affects everybody. Yeah. And I'm seeing it more and more and more because, the diet is not getting better. And, I heard something hopeful the other day that they were going to start regulating doctors and how many antibiotics they prescribed, because they really were truly worried about running out of antibiotics for, I don't know if it's our specific our kids' generation or our, essentially our great grandchildren. But I don't know. I haven't seen that come through legislation yet. I do have a friend named Joseph Cotton who works at CVS, and he says that their particular business regulates how many antibiotics that they send, and I get a slap on the hand or an email or a warning if they do too many.
If they prescribe too many antibiotics
Yeah.
because they're worried about a shortage?
They're not worried about a shortage. They're worried about antibiotic resistance, and us getting to a point where we don't have antibiotics that work anymore.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and because microbes learn,
Right.
they're really crazy. They call it like almost like a microbial internet, where they come and they have one little microbe that learned how to beat amoxicillin, and then you have this other microbe that learned how to beat cephalexin, and they come and they exchange info, those sly, smart little boogers. And so it's like this, like they call it an internet cafe for microbes and bad bacteria, that they share information. So they don't even have to have been exposed to the antibiotic to learn how to beat the antibiotic. I mean, we see this in the animal kingdom. They're all trying to figure out how to survive and adapt. And, and so, we've got this next group of antibiotics that is in risk of not working anymore.
Wow.
And so obviously the more you treat bacteria with antibiotics, the more that they're going to be able to share with each other.
Yeah.
So now we have this population of what's called the superbug, and they're resistant to 8-10 different antibiotics. And I'm not going to go into what I've seen in the CCUs, but it's terrible. And antibiotic resistance is terrible. And it begins not only with the provider that will overprescribe, but the patient who demands a quick fix.
Right.
And,
okay.
Yeah. And so
so there's two parties responsible for that.
Yeah. And maybe we can throw a third one in, the advertisers who are saying, ask your doctor for this new blah, blah, blah,
Right. Yep.
So, I think that it's, there's a few parties who all have to take responsibility.
Yep. I've always been curious about that, why I'm being advertised to on TV. I mean, you can't watch a sporting event. We like to watch football when it's the right time. And you can't watch some football without a medical company, pharmaceutical company, telling you what you should ask your doctor about.
Right.
I don't have a medical degree. I don't know anything about medicine. And you're telling me what I'm supposed to ask my doctor about to fix me?
Right.
Like, isn't that why the doctor did so much education and they're so highly paid? Because they're supposed to tell me what I need.
Well,
I don't go.
There's Google and Neighborhood and, or WebMD and so many things now, which I don't hate. I'm not hating on any of those things, because I think patients should try to educate themselves. And I invite them into the process, to learn and make decisions with me. Like, we make the decisions together. I'm not going to make the decision for you. That takes a lot of time, but empowerment, I think, is one of the most valuable tools that we can give our patients, because then outcomes are so much better, really, truly.
Yeah.
So, but when it comes to the antibiotics, I do still feel like the greater burden lies on the providers, because we're the ones that are supposed to be educating. And I could be really tired one day. You could come in and be like, I just want to nip this cold in the bud. I've got a vacation I'm going to, or a business trip that's coming up. Can we just nip this in the bud? And I could be really tired and not want to explain to you why that's a bad idea, and just write you a script and go, yeah, here you go, Ken. There you go. Hope you have a great trip, and be out of your room in 5 minutes.
Yes.
Or I could spend 15 to 20 minutes drawing on my board in each of the rooms. Each of the rooms we have the ability to draw pictures, and Darby Sangre, our other nurse practitioner, she loves to draw and do pictures too. And we could educate you and empower you on why an antibiotic is not going to do anything for the virus that you have, and what it could do to harm you, to where at the end you could make the decision with us, like, I'm going to hold off for a few more days.
Yeah.
Or we could just throw in the towel and be like, I don't really care right now.
Right.
So,
and go ahead and get some antibiotics,
Yeah.
and you still get paid and everyone's happy.
Right.
And the thought just crossed my mind, because now I'm wondering if when right over the time that Marianne and I got married in 2006, I got a really bad knee infection. I think it was my left knee. It was really weird. I don't know how it happened. I don't know where it came from. I haven't had one since. I hadn't had one prior. But it's one of the few times they gave me some pretty solid antibiotics. So I'm like, I'm getting married. Like I was having a hard time walking. I couldn't walk without a limp, and I thought I was going to wind up on crutches. This is the week leading up to our wedding. So they let me up pretty good on antibiotics, and it was still pretty sore, but at least I could walk without a limp. And then on the honeymoon, we were in Jamaica, of course, out in the sun all the time. And the sun really bothered me. Really bothered me.
Yeah, it's called photosensitivity.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But I am one of those people that sort of believes deep down that I hear what you're saying, but I'm always going to feel a little sick on food. But I did not feel that way as a kid. So the thoughts never crossed my mind, like maybe those antibiotics about the time I was 20, 21, maybe I never properly recovered from that.
Well, don't get me wrong. I'm not against antibiotics. Likely what you had was I'm not sure, right? But cellulitis of the knee, which can make people lose a limb, and so I'm not gonna, I think antibiotics is a life-saving invention. But it needs to be used sparingly and in the right scenarios, which it kind of sounds like in your scenario, it was, well-intended and probably needed.
Yeah.
But the aftercare.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking, because that was in a new season of life. There was a whole different level of responsibility and things going on business-wise, and I didn't know anything about this. I never tried to replace those antibodies with probiotics, et cetera. So now I'm kind of curious if that was a pivot point, because I don't remember feeling sick on food as a kid, but as an adult, I really can't remember not feeling a little sick.
And we do talk about that straw that breaks the camel's back. For a lot of people, it is actually a phase of life, really. So like getting married, happy stress, right? Having a baby, happy stress, a new job, happy stress, but still stress nonetheless. And so if you combine, becoming an adult, which is very stressful, nobody necessarily gives you a manual on how to do that. There's a lot of figuring out, a lot of mistakes, a lot of like, why did I do that? Or anyway, all that to say, you combine that with antibiotic exposure. And again, back to that puzzle piece, everybody has different puzzles that make, different pieces that make up their picture, and their clinical picture. And so, totally. That would be the part that you would write in your 20-page intake as you.
That would be a data point. Yeah. But depression is, it's close to my heart too. It's so rampant. I mean, I've heard someone say that our hardest battles are always fought between our ears. And I think that's just so the case. Like the hardest battles are just in our head oftentimes. But what's so bad about depression is it drives people to isolation. And telling someone, look, man, you just kind of need to get a grip or whatever, like that doesn't help, because if you're depressed, you're thinking you're the worst. You're actively thinking that you're the worst and you should just get a grip, but you feel helpless and powerless to do that. When you have patients coming in, are they coming to you first to see like what's going on kind of in the body, or are they going to a counselor first and maybe that's not working, or kind of where do you fall in those attempts at correcting it?
Oh, really in all of the gaps. I've had people with new onset, and I like those because then they haven't been wrecked by the medical institution. They haven't been put on several meds yet. They haven't seen therapists alone. I love therapists. I use them all the time. But, we have to, I think something the medical community needs to keep fighting to do, and I keep seeing glimmers of like good effort, is come together collaboratively. Like we're not fighting against each other. There's plenty of patients for all of us. Working together is something that I get hopeful when I see. And man, but building that network takes a while, like figuring out who you want to send your patients to, because you want them to have the best experience, right? And so it's taken me 5 years to even get what I call a Rolodoc instead of a Rolodex.
Nice.
All my medical assistants roll their eyes at me. They're like, "You're so lame, Jaimee."
I think it works.
Rolodoc of people I want to send them to, and then we communicate. Good collaborative care is when we communicate back and forth about patients. And so I definitely see that in the integrative world, you need a collaborative effort.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important.
If someone's coming to you, say with early onset depression, what are they saying? What are their symptoms?
Well, just that they are, not finding the meaning in life, or that they, don't have the motivation to do things, or they're just crying, or, anxiety mixes with depression. Oftentimes we actually do have a very boring screen that seems very cold and, not inhuman, but like, I like to have the conversation, but the screen is there as well, so that we can objectify what they're feeling, and it actually has a number to it.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
So, we need to ask those hard questions too. Like, how dark are your thoughts? What have you thought? Do you have a plan? Those type of things. And, not everybody needs the same caliber of help.
Yeah.
So those screens are really important, but the conversation to me is very important too.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we figure out like what it is that's driving it. And there's a difference between feeling depressed and having depression. You can feel depressed sometimes, and then you can reach out to a friend, gain perspective, talk to your spouse, do something to lift that. People who struggle with chronic depression either don't have those coping mechanisms, don't have a dysfunctional family, have a dysfunctional social network, or those coping mechanisms just have failed them in some way.
Yes.
And so I think that's what we even see. It's so special with the story of Jesus and the demoniac, where you're talking about how he, people with depression isolate themselves, and, he had all this legion inside him, right? That was lying to him and saying all these things, that war between your ears that you're talking about. He touched him, and he identified with him. Oftentimes when Jesus would heal people, he would call them a name like son, daughter, and touch on the familial issue. And then he would bring them in, from the outside in, and deal with the societal issue. And then he would dress them. Somehow at the end of that, he was in his right mind.
Yeah.
So we think that there's like this miraculous thing that happens. It is miraculous though. I mean, it's amazing when a human being is healed, but there was some very intentional steps that happened. And I feel like he is the greatest healer we'll ever learn from. And so I knew that story. And one day in the critical care unit, I was getting report. This story still yanks in my heart, brings tears in my eyes, because I was like, the Bible is so real. It's so true. But there's this lady, and she was out of her mind, Ken. She was strapped to the bed. She had a hair that went past her hips, down to her knees. And it was all in this bird's nest. It was a huge knots on the top of her head. And the nurse was like, "You're going to have a crazy night. Just make sure you give her Geodon shot and her Haldol and her Xanax. And then, the night will go great." And I walked into that room, and I'm not judging that nurse. I don't know what went on with her shift. I just know what I was responsible for. I walked in her room, and I looked at the room. The room was a mess. And it looked like she hadn't been bathed in I don't know how long. And her bed sheets were gross, and she was tied down. And so I was like, you know what? I am literally just gonna do these things that I learned in this pericope, in this gospel story. And so I cleaned up the room. I changed her bed sheets. I gave her a bed bath. I took 4 bottles of lotion because I didn't have anything else, and put them in her hair and combed her hair for probably an hour.
Wow.
And I took off her wrist restraints, and by the end of the night, she looked like somebody's grandma, like a human again. The room looked right. The bed looked right. And I did not have to give her Geodon. I didn't have to give her Haldol. I didn't even give her a Xanax. And she fell asleep without her restraints on and literally slept like a baby.
Wow.
And I just I didn't learn that in a medical book.
Right.
I learned that from Jesus and his approach with people. Yep. And I listened to her story. That was the other thing. She just talked, talk. And that's all she needed was human interaction. Isn't that what we all need?
Right. Yeah.
And so I do think that in a world of depression and anxiety, that makes this social isolation and the stay-at-home time difficult, for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so I'm thankful for platforms like Zoom and FaceTime and things like that, but I'm so ready for this to be over. So our people who do struggle with that can get that human interaction that we crave. We need it. So
yeah, you're totally right about that. Yeah, there is I never thought of it. I never thought how that Jesus didn't just walk around throwing healings on people and just going about his way.
Yeah.
But he did affect them. He did bring them in, dress them, clothe them, feed them. They came into community and they weren't just healed.
Right.
That's fascinating. I never thought of that.
Yeah. And it takes an effort. It takes people's hands
and
their words and their person to bring about that change.
Yeah. Yep.
And I've seen it happen continuously, not just in the CCU, but with very dear friends that I live every day with, and then even abroad. So I know that's real. I know that's real. And I experience that with my patients sometimes it doesn't happen every day where it's what you're saying is really impacting somebody, but when it does, it's just this is the best.
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure. But that's interesting that story about that lady, because one thing that has helped me, and it's a principle that is obviously it's not original with me, but I've read it elsewhere and I've seen it, is when you are really down, clean your room. Or do something. Do something like that. And I've did twice last year. I'm talking depressed, and the whole weekend is going very poorly. And because you're right, it's not just the effect on the single person; it has effect on the family.
Oh yeah.
And come Sunday afternoon, this thing's getting really, really bad, and it gets bad enough where I just decided to clean the room. And the worse that it was, the deeper the clean, and it helps. It does help just to do a little something. Now that's not a prescription for everyone just every single day, but doing a little something does help.
Yeah.
But this depression is going to be an issue if it can originate from the gut and affect your brain health, and we're all on this standard American diet. Then depression logically is going to become a greater issue.
Oh, it is growing.
So what's to do about that? Just eat better and have a more congruent, healthier, holistic lifestyle? Or what are your thoughts there?
I mean, first we have to slow down, right? We are kind of in an entertainment craze. Our society likes to be entertained. And the lengths to which, the entertainment industry has to go to entertain us means we kind of work all week so that we can afford to be entertained. And I don't know. I think I'm a little old fashioned. I grew up we only had TV on Fridays.
Oh, wow.
I ate mac and cheese with peas and tuna in it. And I watched Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, and Little House on the Prairie. And it was junk food and junk for the mind Friday,
right.
Yeah.
Cheat day.
It was, yeah. And my mom was very regimented about it. But it definitely gave me a love for other things, to be entertained and enjoy other things other than just media. I think her job was a whole heck of a lot easier than yours or mine. I mean, every kid has a tablet now. you
Right.
know, and we actually, Marco and I, succumbed to getting a TV just this year. We've been married for, how long have we been married? 11 years. And just bought, we didn't buy it. A friend was getting rid of it and they're like, you want it? You want it? And we're like, oh, fine. And actually though, we rarely turn it on. I would say maybe like once a week.
Yeah.
And I was
for live TV. You mean like real TV?
No,
or you turn it on for like
that.
Netflix or something?
Netflix.
Yeah.
Not even live. So I don't know. Does that mean we don't have a real TV? We don't connect it to anything live. But I think that we need to open our minds to maybe like fellowship is a good idea, and hanging with. I mean, obviously that feels wrong right now. I want to have fellowship again, but going outside, enjoying nature, gardening, reading a book, playing a game. My boys are getting big into chess. There's other types of entertainment that don't allow us to completely zone out. But I think there's so much pain in the world that people want some form of zoning out to stay
I agree.
engaged and aware and sharp-minded. That's not fun. That's why you have alcohol and drugs and entertainment. So you can not think for a second. And I'm not being self-righteous here. I like the occasional zoning out too. But that's where self-control comes in. But if you are having pain, that's when people, subscribe to those things more often than not. And I think there's a lot of pain in the world.
Oh, there certainly is. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know how someone goes through the teenage years with Instagram right now. I don't know how you do it.
I mean,
these people are messaging awful stuff to each other. As a dude, as a guy going through my teen years with Instagram and being one of the many unfortunate ones that gets bullied through social media, that's got to be extremely difficult. But as a girl, it seems like it'd be so much more difficult. I mean, how that's a hard one to have a decent answer to because it's so rampant and it's so awful.
And I think I have a lot of self-confidence, and I think it was because I was blessed to have a father around. And girls, you don't hear the phrase like mommy issues. You hear the phrase daddy issues. And that can really affect a little girl if she's, not told she's beautiful or doesn't feel like she has a relationship with their dad that she can find confidence in and know that they're going to be there for her. Because then she's going to go out looking for that, right? And social media is not the greatest place to find your confidence.
No.
That foundation.
Yeah, you're right.
And, again, my dad also gave me the blessing of a godly heritage too. So I feel like I got double blessed, like a dad who really loved me and then one who showed me who my heavenly father was too. So people who are going to try to find confidence in the world are going to be disappointed and disappointed to the degree that they lose their lives.
Oh, 100%.
So
yeah, you're totally right about that.
And I'm not saying lose their lives just metaphorically, literally lose their lives.
Oh, yes. Yeah, for sure. But even you talk about the parenting, there is a benefit to just being in proximity with your kids as a dad, for sure. I read this with dads and daughters. I don't know if it translates to dads and sons. It probably does. And I assume it works with the mom too, but there's just a benefit in having some physical touch in that proximity. It's part of like a proper upbringing. And so what's difficult with the situation that we're now in 2020 is reading a lot of bad food. We have a very sedentary lifestyle. We're all addicted to entertainment. The family unit is super dysfunctional.
Right.
There's so much stacked against us that, what an interesting time to grow up.
Are we depressed now here?
Right. and yet, if someone pays attention to some of these things or like doesn't just consume what happens to be put in front of them, it's also a wonderful time to be alive because we have so much at our disposal. There's so much at our fingertips.
Yeah.
And would much prefer growing up with the challenge being Instagram than growing up where, it was likely you wouldn't live past who knows what age because someone would come along and whack your head off.
And be like encouraged. I mean, you're only responsible for what you know and your children and the friends or the community that, God's put around you. You're responsible for them. If we start like taking on the whole burden of the world on our shoulders, like that's not for us to bear.
Right.
Yep. And so for me, I guess I get hope in having this vocation, having this purpose in life to do what I do. And like, I'm only responsible in the moment for this, this conversation right now.
Yep.
Or that patient that's right in front of me, or when my children and I are together, those are the moments I'm responsible for. And so I think that we just keep making those positive decisions and good decisions and acting rightly, and good is going to come out of that. You have to have some faith there.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the outlook doesn't look so bleak.
Yes. Yes, I agree. And it's one of the reasons I think it's unfortunate that some people poo-poo education. And I mean, part of it I get, but I think there's a very entrepreneurial kind of driven society that we're in now because we had quite a few successful entrepreneurs that dropped out of college and now they're worth bajillion dollars. And everyone's like, why would you go to college? College was a thing of the past, all of these types of things. But literally knowledge can change your life. So we shouldn't be poo-pooing education. And yeah, I understand if, let's not go waste a bunch of money on a degree that you're never going to use, but education is super valuable. Like this is how you change a life, a family, a society. You don't know what you don't know. So education is important. What about cannabis? What are your thoughts on cannabis as it's becoming more legalized in more states? Have you worked with it at all? Have you seen it be beneficial or not? Or what are your thoughts on that in general?
Well, first, I think I'd like to preface that I'm kind of skeptical of anything out there that has as many cure-alls as, cannabis claims to have. However, I have seen it help. I think it's an interesting era because, again, we're talking about people's desire to zone out and have freedom from pain or worry. And so I think eventually there'll be a market there once they legalize it everywhere. Obviously, I think the only reason that it wasn't legalized before is just because they couldn't figure out a way to tax it,
Sure.
So it wasn't beneficial,
Right.
Economically to the government yet. So there's a lot of politics involved there, right? I do think people should be careful. I've had to send a few people to the ER for cannabis-induced reactions, whether they took too much CBD. CBE stands for childbirth education.
Okay, I was like, what's CBD? I haven't heard of that one yet.
Education's on my brain right now. But CBD, they took too much of it, and the common theme has been heart palpitations.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, a few people who have vaped and basically injured their lungs. So I think that a healthy dose of respect is warranted. I do that with all the herbs and essential oils I use. We talk about in medicine, there is a dose, a frequency, a route, and a duration. And then, if any of those things are not respected, then you run into issues.
Right.
And so I think that that's what I'm looking for is more protocols with respectable doses and routes and all the things that I just mentioned. Because if you don't, even with essential oils, like more is not more.
Right.
You know? Yep. And so I think that might be what I'm craving to see in that department a little bit more.
Okay.
Because right now it is wildly unregulated. And
cannabis in general? Okay.
And, you know, you have this grower and that grower and you hope that you're getting the most quote unquote pure product. Everybody says they have a pure product. And I'm like, well, you know, in third party lab testing, I'd like it to get a little bit more organized before I throw all my, you know, eggs in that basket.
Yeah, it makes sense. So one of the challenges with it is there's a lot of studies being done now, but historically there's not a lot of studies on it because there's no motivation. A lot of studies
there
generally.
There are internationally.
There are, you say?
Internationally,
okay.
Yeah. But not in the U.S. yet. And, you know, and we're kind of an arrogant crew if it's not done on this
right, we don't trust
this ground, you know, this good old USA ground, you know, it's not, yeah, we don't trust it.
Yeah, you're right about that. Now, when you said people have gone to the emergency room because they've taken too much CBD, is that CBD oil?
CBD oil, or they vaped, or, you know, or they got a bad, you know, batch of cannabis, or, you know, and people are always ginger with mentioning it. I will say it does put me in an interesting situation because currently I'm not allowed to prescribe any sort of controlled medication to someone who admits they do cannabis, because it's considered a check mark against you for using drugs kind of in an uncontrolled way. Okay.
You mean you can't prescribe, say...
opioids.
You can't prescribe opioids to someone who has told you that they use cannabis?
Right. You're correct. I'm not supposed to.
Interesting. Because they may interact in a way that would be detrimental?
It's not because they interact. It's because it puts you into a high-risk category for abusing substances.
Okay. Because they're already using a substance, cannabis, and now they're going to have another substance, opioid, and if you give them... I guess I'm just curious on the rationale. If you give them a couple of substances, there's a high likelihood that they get addicted?
Well, because you're pushing exactly. Because you're pushing the same gratification button, kind of, that lights up, again, those centers of the brain, just like we talked about sugar doing.
Yep.
And so, it puts them at risk for, addictive-like tendencies. And they're really cracking down, or saying that they're cracking down. I don't really know if they are, but they are definitely making regulations stricter on providers, as far as like we have to check a website to make sure people haven't gone to several doctors to, you know, get medications from several different physicians or clinics or hospitals even. And then we have to make sure that they're not, you know, using or abusing several other substances. And then if we do see that, we are supposed to decline and not prescribe them anything.
Yeah.
Whether they're actually cracking down on opioid and substance abuse, I don't really know. I don't really prescribe the stuff much. You know, we use other modalities quite often, and I don't do any chronic pain medication at our clinic.
So if someone's going to have to get treated for chronic pain, they're going to the hospital or something?
No, we send them to a pain clinic.
Oh, okay.
And quite honestly, that's not just so that they're regulated, but because they deserve the best management for pain, and those substances can kill you. To put it, you know, succinctly. And so I like them being in the hands of people who deal with those bigger doses every day and combined. And they have some things like injections that are helpful, even like, you know, nerve blocking injections and things like that. So I do acute, meaning like if you come in, you broke a bone, I'm going to give you, a week or two worth max. But that is such the rarity. And we have other modalities to use as well that I like. But in an integrative approach, I'm using massage therapists. I'm using ELT, which is like this electronic lymphatic drainage therapy that reduces inflammation and pain and swelling. It brings that all down. I'm using chiropractics. Did I already say that?
You hadn't.
Yeah. So, and physical therapists, there's a lot of different things that we're going to use at our disposal to help a person who's having pain. And it's not like a one thing approach again.
Right.
I don't, it's not that I hate pain medication. It's that I really don't like the one note approach.
Right.
So,
yeah. I just think it's unfortunate the story of someone getting on pain medication because they needed to, and then they get hooked on it, and then they wind up going from, that to harder things, and then they wind up dead. I mean, that happens often.
Well, it happens like post-surgery. I mean, you should see the amount they give people after a surgery. And, most people don't even use that amount and they, save it in their medicine cabinet for a rainy day.
Right.
But it's a lot of medication. And if you finish that full round, depending on who your surgeon is, and you have an addictive personality, it is definitely possible to get hooked. So I stay sensitive to that too. I don't want to be the cause of anybody experiencing harm, right? We're not supposed to do any harm.
Sure.
So got to weigh that with every decision we make.
When you had patients coming to you with lung issues from vaping, was this about, when was it? 6 months, 9 months ago when vaping was causing a lot of problems? Do you remember this? It was last year at some point.
Yes, I do. Actually, it was before that.
Was it? Okay. Like a year ago, you think?
Yeah. Maybe even longer.
Okay.
But I have had such a young crew come in vaping, and I kind of look at them. I'm still kind of young, and I don't know. I'm probably not super relevant to them, but I kind of just get on their level, and I'm like, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Could we talk about it?
Yeah.
And could we talk about how bad it is for you? And, it's always a good conversation. They laugh, I laugh, but then I'm like, but you're going to stop, right? Like today, so.
Are they vaping cannabis or tobacco?
All the above.
Okay.
And it's just a dangerous game, especially like, man, my dad used to tell me like, Jaimee, you're stupid before you're 30, and I was like, that's probably true. And now I know that was 100% true.
Right.
I mean, like your cerebral frontal cortex is not even fully formed until like your mid-20s. And you make some pretty dumb decisions just because you don't know what you don't know, which was my dad's other favorite phrase to tell me.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that is a key point. Like your brain is literally not fully developed until your mid-20s. Yeah. So people need to account for that.
And then people who are selling them these products know that. They know that they have dumb consumers.
Yep.
And so they're preying upon that and having no problem doing that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I thought it was good when that all sort of happened. Juul and some of those other vape companies got put under more scrutiny because their market was basically high schoolers.
Yeah.
Young kids. I mean, and maybe even younger than that some, but like young kids are into that stuff.
Right.
But wouldn't it be better to be able to prescribe cannabis for pain instead of opioids?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
But you can't right now.
No.
Well, you can't. In Tennessee, it's illegal. So
exactly.
Well, is it legal from a medical standpoint here yet?
Yeah. I'm not able to prescribe it yet.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So if you were able to prescribe it, though, you you would use it with some discretion.
Yeah, I would use it from some discretion, but I for sure would roll a joint for a cancer patient before I would hand them narcotics. Because for cancer, you have to be able to eliminate, meaning you have to have healthy bowel movements and frequent ones. And one of the main things that narcotics does is slow your bowels. It makes you constipated.
Oh, wow. Yep.
And so that's a major thing with people after surgery. You got to get them walking, got to get them moving. And it's because they often suffer from what's called an ileus, where they have a small intestine blockage. It's honestly just because they are not moving and they're on narcotics. The two things are just terrible. So with cancer patients, yeah, for sure, I'm going to roll them a joint or prescribe them one or whatever I'm able to do. And then I'm going to get them on some bowel movement regimen, whether it's coffee enemas or magnesium or tons of vitamin C, whatever it is, just so they're detoxifying.
Yes.
Because that's what, partly cancer is a chronic inability to detoxify yourself. And I don't know if you've heard this saying, it's not to scare anybody, but we all have cancer cells on the side of our body, probably all of us right now, Lincoln, you and me, and sitting in this room, but our systems are doing a good job and eliminating it.
Yes, I have heard that.
Obviously, when you have cancer cells that don't move and are allowed to stay in those organ systems, that's when it poses a problem.
Yeah.
So elimination is huge, and narcotics slow down elimination.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. When you mentioned route earlier, are you just talking about, like, for example, smoking CBD instead of ingesting CBD?
Correct.
Like, is that what you mean by route?
Yeah. So via mouth, topically, inhaling it.
Yeah.
Suppository form, intranasally. There's several different routes when we use medication, herbs, oils, and each one has its specific dose. And when you apply something topically or ingest something, it has to go through a first pass, which is your liver. When you inject something into a vein, that's hitting every organ within about 30 to 60 seconds.
Yeah.
So when you inhale things, same thing. It's gonna, because you inhale it, it goes into your alveoli, which hits the bloodstream like right away. Yep. So you do have to be careful with that. And, I have no problem with people participating in their care. I do think maybe one way I feel like medical community does serve the population well is learning those type of things. And we can come together and work together. Yep. I'm not trying to keep that information under lock and key by any means.
Yep.
I do think it's unfortunate that some people don't have that type of support system, because then they feel like they do need to venture it out and learn it all on their own.
Yeah.
And we're just not created to know everything.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's so true. And I mean, I totally subscribe to the idea that, if you are a hammer, then everything in the world is a nail, and so there's these advocates for anything. And I think it certainly exists in the cannabis community too, where it's like, it's a fix all, it's like, man, that's just, obviously that's not the case. But there are instances, seizures, for example. I mean, we had a friend whose kid had awful, awful seizures. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, just what little I've seen of via video, like honestly, I can't imagine if Mariana or one of the kids went through a seizure. Like I can't imagine seeing that.
It's very scary.
It must be terrifying. And this kid had seizures frequently, and they had to basically smuggle a high potency THC oral spray. Guess what? It fixed it.
Yeah.
Kid hasn't had a seizure in 2.5 years.
It can be amazing for seizures.
Yeah.
And I think it definitely has its role in the medical community. And I'm excited for the horizon with cannabinoids. I think it's I think we're in a crucial time where it could either become really helpful or it could just get completely ruined. So we'll have to see.
If it gets completely ruined, is that because everyone's using it for everything or abusing it? Or what would be a potential outcome there where it really goes poorly?
Yeah, I think that exactly like you said, the regulations have to push it through so that integrative providers like myself can use it helpfully and healthfully with respectable protocols.
Yep.
And I think that, those regulations could get it into people's hands in a fashion where they don't feel like they have to hide anything or, and then they could get, the healthy protocols they need to be able to use it to a degree that it would be most beneficial.
Right.
And so we're not there yet. And I'm just like, why is it taking so long? Why does anything take so long? But I'm excited for when we get there.
Yeah.
Because I will be, one of the first to sign up to use it.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. I have some CBD joints right here. You want to smoke one? I don't feel anything from them.
Yeah.
But I do, if I'm honest, I do like the occasional act of smoking something.
Yeah.
Like just I don't know.
Mariana has told me this.
Yeah. It's gratifying for me. And so occasionally I'll be like, all right, you work out really hard on a podcast, you can have your second cup of coffee, or you work out really hard and later on the podcast, you can smoke a CBD joint or something like that. There's like a reward there.
Cloves are my thing for a minute. Cloves. Like clove cigarettes. Like
what's a clove cigarette?
Like they're like
I haven't smoked many
cloves.
Cigarettes.
And unfortunately, they're in black paper, so they gave me terrible headaches, and I couldn't run afterwards. And I was like, why am I doing this? So I didn't keep up that habit for long, but it was they smelled like cinnamony, like cloves.
Interesting.
They were like, it was a.
Did you roll it, or you bought it in a pack and you just smoked it just like a cigarette?
Pack, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I was like, this doesn't necessarily bode too well for a integrative practitioner. I mean, this was years ago, but regardless, I was a nurse then, and I was like, you know what? This is not having a good effect on my body.
Right.
I need to stop. And so I think it was like maybe for a full month or 2 months max. But I liked the feeling of it, just like you're saying. And I think people do, again, we're going back to that, like people need to be gratified and satiated and somehow like let go of the stress. So I'm again not pointing fingers at anybody. I just would love it if we could find a solution that is one, legal, and then two, maybe regulated, because let me tell you, there's some distributors that don't care about you.
Sure.
And they don't care how pure a product it is.
Yep.
Some who do.
Right.
And I think those are the ones that should be highlighted, and we should be able to work with them.
Yep.
So just the same thing. Well, we hope the same thing happens with medication, that they're pure substances. We found out all the time that they're not.
Right.
I just think it's the same thing. We're crying out for people to have ethics.
Right.
And there's not ethics, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, where are these people? Where are the ethical businessmen, and businesswomen too? So I think, once it's regulated and we have as certified as a pure product as we possibly can have, then, I think it will be, I don't want to hand a kid with a seizure disorder a laced product.
Right,
or
exactly.
Or an impure product, and cause further problems.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, 100%. It just seems like, take for example, smoking a CBD joint. It seems like a lot cleaner than smoking something tobacco. Like I was smoking here and not a problem. Next day walk in, don't smell a thing. One time I was just curious. I used to smoke more cigars. I really don't smoke cigars that often anymore, but occasionally, it's kind of nice to have a little Black and Mild. And so I tried smoking a Black and Mild in here one time. And for those that don't know, it's just like a very mini, very light cigar kind of. You don't inhale or anything. At least I definitely don't. But I only smoke like half of it.
You just said I did not inhale.
No, with a Black and Mild or a cigar.
Yeah.
Well, you don't want to inhale a cigar.
No, I was laughing at the political reference.
Oh, wasn't that a president that said that?
It's Clinton.
Who was it? Okay.
He's, I did not inhale.
What was it? What was that in reference to, by the way?
Well, because just the fact that he kind of was known for lying and dishonesty. And so it came out that he might have smoked a joint and he goes, I did not inhale.
I remember the not inhaling part.
Yeah.
I also remember the part where he was basically according to your definition of sex, I didn't have it or something like that. Like he's like, dude, this is way off the
right.
But anyhow, I've smoked.
He's got speech writers.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what it is. I smoked just a portion of a Black and Mild in here, only one time. Awful. Next day, you could smell it. It took like 2 or 3 days for this, and I didn't even smoke very much of it because I could tell like this is gonna stick. CBD and that stuff, it just doesn't stick. So it just seems like if it seems cleaner. If a Black and Mild smells that bad 2 days later or a day later, what is it? What's it sticking to in your body? You know. We should probably talk about COVID-19.
Okay.
Since you're here.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on it?
Oh, should I play my conspiracy theorist card? Did you know that phrase conspiracy theory is actually a conspiracy theory?
Oh, I'm 100% convinced that it is. Do you think COVID-19 is a big cover up to install 5G? Is that what you think is going on here?
No.
That's one of the ones that I've heard.
I know there's several. And then I think there's like some, human trafficking rings that they think are, getting exposed. And so it's smoke and mirrors for that.
So I've heard that.
I really don't
understand that.
I think this is what I think. I think that anytime anything happens in the world, there's going to be a lot of different power grabs and people wanting to figure out how to make it beneficial for them. Right.
Right.
Do I think, the CDC and the who are working tirelessly to make this next savior vaccine plan this so they could make mandatory vaccines? I don't know. And I don't know that it matters. I think that, I'm seeing a lot of interesting things in the world happen right now. Like dictatorships have come on the scene, or political leaders have grabbed all the power so they can shut things down.
Right.
But who says when that is no longer the case? You know?
Yeah.
Right now we're probably getting listened to because privacy acts have been revoked all over the place so that there can be some more surveillance of essential things like COVID-19. So who says when that surveillance gets, put back to where it was and we have those rights back? So there's a lot of different things happening. Do I think that they're going to try to make a mandatory vaccine? There is nothing new. Like people are talking about like that's like something new. Like, oh my gosh, they're going to try to make a mandatory vaccine. They've already done that like multiple times for multiple decades. So that is nothing new. If people think that's like something new and scary on the horizon, it's like that's an old tale. And so, I watched this with the H1N1. I was a CCU nurse at the time of H1N1. I was pregnant with Jonah, I believe. And I remember getting so much flack from the CCU nurses and doctors and management that I would not get the vaccine. And I was like, this has been barely tested.
Oh, wow.
I was like, they rushed it. They rushed it. And, because again, vaccines are always saviors, right?
Yep.
Not just like good old hand washing, distancing, immune boosting things that, none of that is enough. Or even getting a good test, none of that is enough. We need a savior vaccine. And so I remember actually them trying to bully me into getting the vaccine. And I had to wear a big green button on my scrubs that said, I wear a mask because I care. And they all called me the masked lady. It was like I had a scarlet letter or something like that. And then all of the other nurses, I think I was the only one on the entire floor. All the other nurses had a blue button that said, I got the shot because I care. So all the patients knew that I didn't get the shot. And all of that, all of the nurses did what they were supposed to do. Right. And I definitely, if I hadn't again had confidence, I think I probably would have felt a little ostracized and felt a little bad, maybe even gotten bullied into getting the vaccine. Do you know how many lawsuits came out after that vaccine, especially of medical workers that were bullied into getting it and had all sorts of neurological issues? Yeah, like even things like narcolepsy. Like how can you be a surgeon or nurse and have narcolepsy? You can't. You lose your job. So, I mean, there's all of these things coming out of all of these lawsuits based upon nurses and doctors feeling bullied into getting these. Well, I did not get the H1N1 then that year, but guess who did? All of my coworkers who thought that they were protected from the vaccine. I think they lowered their guard a little bit. I saw them eating whatever they wanted in the break room. Maybe they didn't wash their hands enough. Maybe they weren't wearing a mask because they got the shot because they cared, right?
Oh, you're saying and some of these people got H1N1?
Oh, yeah. All these nurses
after they
fell
had
sick.
the vaccine?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was they dubbed it a poor performing vaccine that year. So anyway, there's a lot of social pressure when it comes to these things. There are these big companies like Bachelor and these other vaccine companies, they actually meet with government officials on a yearly basis to prepare for what they call pandemic preparedness. Interestingly enough, in 2009, the WHO changed their definition for what a pandemic actually was and removed the portion of the description to remove the part that said many simultaneous deaths. So now it just reads basically a virus that the world's not immune to, but they took out the part of simultaneous deaths, all around the globe.
Yep.
So the death portion was removed, but they were still able to issue a pandemic in 2009 because of this new definition. So all these governments put orders, like Britain and Italy and Germany and the US put orders in for this H1N1 vaccine and were ridiculed very, very hard because people were not lining up to get the vaccine because the numbers, the projected numbers didn't meet, how they had cried wolf, so to speak.
Oh, okay.
And so all of these governments were basically going back to the vaccine companies and asking them, canceling their orders if they could.
Oh, wow.
And so they lost, I think, 15 to 20% in revenue that year, these vaccine companies did, which translates into the billions.
Sure.
So do I think that someone evil, made this vaccine or made this virus so that they could, do another vaccine? I don't know. Are they going to make good on that? You sure as heck they're going to, it's a business opportunity, right? And so I do think it's interesting that, if we're not scared enough for our health to line up for a vaccine that has not been well tested and has not been put in through any double blind trials, what hurts worse than fear for your health? And I think it's fear of economic loss. And that's what we're experiencing now. I do think that people who are, have autoimmune issues, have cancers, have kids that they're concerned about with, underlying genetic mutations are going to be in a hard spot maybe here in a year when they're going to have to explain to people why they don't have enough concern for the elderly or our economics, enough to get the shot.
The COVID-19 vaccine.
Yeah. And I think it's going to, I don't know. I think we're going to be in an interesting situation. I don't know. We'll have to see. I know enough to not worry about too much about tomorrow, let it it has enough trouble of it. Today has enough trouble of its own is how that verse goes.
Right.
But I also know we're supposed to be innocent like doves, but wise as serpents.
Right.
And so it is going to be an interesting, what's the word I'm looking for? The landscape is going to be interesting here in a year, and we're just going to have to navigate it as it comes to us.
Yep.
Do I believe it's real? Oh my gosh, yes. You know, do I think the media takes every opportunity to write a sensational story? Yeah, I don't even know if their goal is to induce fear or not. I don't care. I just know the end product is fear for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so I think they should take some responsibility for that. And maybe demonstrate some ethics.
Sure.
You know?
Yep.
So.
Well, the news is very scripted. And if you notice, they all sort of talk the same. It doesn't really matter what channel you're on. Like they all they have this tone of voice and they have this, it's super scripted. We're watching this show on Apple TV because Apple TV is handing out free subscriptions for a year right now. I think everyone. We just got a random email. So I'm like, why not try it for a year? There's not much on there yet, but there is this show, The Morning Show, and it's about the news basically and anchoring and a morning show. And it kind of gives you the inside look on what goes on behind the camera. It's very, very scripted. And the boss of the networks, like they are affecting, you know, what gets on air and what doesn't, and then how you go about communicating what even does get on air. And those guys are super connected, you know? So
sure.
for starters, this news it's not that objective. Like these guys are all in kind of playing the same game.
They are.
And look, they're doing it for views and they know how to get viewers. So, I'm sure it's being overplayed. The thing with the conspiracies that I always wonder, it's like, okay, so what you're saying with that particular conspiracy, whatever it is, like, that could be true. Like there's a path to that being true, but you have to admit it could also be true if it just was as it seemed. You know what I mean? And so now that's just sort of like that's a check and balance that I think about. Like, sure, if you pull out these segments, and I'm not talking about like who created this thing, I'm just talking about like there's a ton of conspiracies now. So pick the craziest one and use that as a test. Sure, if you watch enough or if you get enough of audio clips or video clips or whatever of different officials and people in power in a 1 hour conference, and you pull out some clips and you do that enough, it's like, well, this could potentially be what's going on. Sure, it could also be it just is what it seems.
Well, if you just look at people's morality, then it isn't surprising that so many different entities could make or find benefit in something like this. And it doesn't even have to be intentional. Like the virus doesn't have to even be like intentionally released into the environment. Viruses do just come around. It's the study, epidemiology, it demonstrates this, historically. The viruses come around. So much of the population gets it, then they become immune, and the virus no longer has a host, and so then it can no longer be spread, and it goes away. And this is even sometimes the discussion on, well, did vaccines really help or not? Because that virus was likely going out anyway once it hit a certain percentage of the population. So, for instance, they're like, polio vaccine didn't make polio go away. Polio made polio go away. Those type of topics, right? And so, when we when we talk about this virus, whether it was man-made or not, I don't know if it really matters. What I do know is that there's good people in the world who are always going to be helpers, and they're going to help in situations of crisis. And there's always going to be people who are going to take advantage of situations to further their agendas. That's always going to be true.
Right.
And so, I think we decide on what team we play on, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And I know what side I play on, and so therefore, I'm just gonna keep doing that.
Yeah. Well, I think can't go wrong with that.
Yeah.
How about how does it work when polio makes polio go away? How does it work when enough of people have the virus that it self defeats?
So it's called herd immunity, and which is a little bit of a misappropriated term. So like the vaccine companies talk about herd immunity. I'll explain it. So let's say we have 10 people in a room, and there's one person that has this virus. So they infect persons 1 and 2. And let's just say persons 1 and 2 affect persons 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And they just keep on mingling. Well, when around, it's not an exact number, but about 70% of the population has a virus, then they can't pass it to each other anymore because they're immune.
Okay.
And so then the 30% of the population gets it protected, which is called herd immunity, just because the 70% are immune and it no longer gets continue to be passed.
I see.
So vaccine companies have tried to claim the same thing, that if 70% of the population is vaccinated, then it protects the 30, but it's not exactly the same thing.
It doesn't work quite like
well,
that?
It's not considered herd immunity because you're not, it's not the natural passing through of the virus per se. Herd immunity is something that happens naturally. And, vaccines are very anything but natural. So, they try to claim the same thing. It's not exactly the same. But
yeah. Now, corona means crown, right? It's sort of the coronavirus.
Apparently the way that the bacteria looks like under a microscope.
Okay.
I'm sorry, the virus. Yeah.
And was SARS and MERS, were those coronaviruses too, or they were just similar because they were respiratory infections?
Right. So, they're all respiratory syndromes, right? And there's actually several coronaviruses. In fact, I actually, in the last few weeks, have told several people they have coronavirus, but they don't have COVID-19.
Right.
So that genetic assay makes for an interesting conversation. You have coronavirus, but you don't have the coronavirus.
Interesting. You can tell that through a blood sample, or how can you tell that?
It's a respiratory swab. A nasal swab. And so, we send it off and it comes back, and then you can tell, what respiratory virus that they had. So the other ones, I think were other spliced viruses and not forms of COVID. But they all, the common denominator is that they all create respiratory inflammation. So,
okay. Gotcha.
Almost a syndrome.
Right. Yes. So H1N1 was 9-10 years ago, give or take, because you said you were pregnant with Jonah. When was SARS and MERS? Was that since then?
Oh, my dad was telling me these dates the other day. I thought he said like 1918 and 1950 something. I can't remember exactly, but they were devastating.
So I thought they were much more recent than that. So is H1N1 the most recent, most similar one that we're experiencing now? I
believe so.
Okay.
I could crack open Google here and look. But what's your question?
People can Google it. So I'm just wondering what you learned being a nurse, deciding not to get the H1N1 vaccine. Like, how did that all play out? I'm not even familiar with H1N1. I remember it being talked about a little bit. I don't remember being concerned about it. I don't remember it affecting my life. I just don't remember that much.
Probably because you were young and didn't have any chronic diseases, much like this is playing out. Although I did see it claim some young lives. I'm very familiar with ARDS, which is acute respiratory distress syndrome. It's terrible. It's horrible. And same thing. They tried to create similar pandemonium. They really did push people to get the vaccine. I remember there were signs everywhere. And really, there was a really big push for the influenza shot after the H1N1, like even more so, to where now, you can pass by a CVS or a Walgreens and it'll say free flu shot, In fact, we have a good friend, Julie Watson. I think you know her. Julie and Jeremiah Watson. And Julie makes really great juices. She uses her own, produce when she can, and otherwise she gets organic. And she makes a really potent, what she calls flu shot. And it's like ginger and turmeric and lemon. And wow, do you pucker up when it's like,
I believe that.
You either have to kind of like gingerly sip it and like just be in pain for a while, or you just knock it back and feel the wild effects of it right away. And Evie, my daughter, she really loves crazy things. She had a class this year with the Academy for DoD, and they ate new things all the time. And so she's like, she tried the flu shot multiple times and knocked it back and really felt proud about it. And we were driving past Kroger the other day, and she saw it. She goes, Mom, look, free flu shots.
You're like, that's not what you think.
I was like, it is not the same. But man, they do a really good job of putting that information out there and making you feel like a terrible person if you don't get it. And there is a lot of flack for people who, from people who have the unfortunate immunocompromised person in their house, to where they're like, it is not fair that we can't safely go anywhere. Like, just like the safe at home, they're under that, umbrella all the time. That's how they feel, like how we feel right now. They feel all the time.
You're saying certain people that have these certain susceptibilities?
Yes. Like whether they have a child who has cancer or leukemia, or they have really severe asthma, or they're a kiddo that just has several different brittle conditions. And if they were to get sick, that would...
Oh, that's a great point. I never thought how some people basically have to live like this all the time.
They do all the time. And can you imagine, the fear and depression, anxiety, like feeling that all the time. So, I feel for them. I do think that vaccines are a great idea. They're a great invention. However, vaccine companies they're impenetrable. They are not responsible if any of their products harm you or I. They were granted immunity long ago by the government. And it's our tax dollars that pay that about $5 billion, I want to say, in vaccine court injuries yearly.
Wow.
It's your and my tax dollars.
That's just court injuries?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's a high number.
It is a high number. And it's really unfortunate, because I feel like if the responsibility was put back in their court and they weren't immune, they didn't have government immunity. Like, what other medical institution, whether it's a drug or a medical device, has immunity from the government?
Right.
They don't have to go back to the drawing board and do a better job, or make something safer, or do any sort of trials, or any research to make this, better. And I'm not even saying that, everybody still would get it if they made it better, because medical freedom is still something that's very important. When that gets taken away, then we're...
Right.
Which it slowly is.
Sure.
Don't be fooled. Yep. It slowly is getting taken away. Your insurance tells you what you can and cannot not get, as far as tests and doctor visits and so and so. So if people think they have medical freedom, once they realize they don't, it might be painful.
Yeah.
But all that to say is, there's no stimulus for them to make a better product. They don't even pay for when you and I get injured, So
it's interesting. I'd forgotten they have immunity.
Yep.
I mean, you can't even build a kid's toy and have immunity, No,
they do. And you have to pay roughly $300 to $500 to even issue a complaint with the vaccine court. So like if you're blue collar family and your kid was injured at the doctor's office that doesn't even really, you don't even feel heard by them. And they're definitely not reporting any reactions to VAERS. VAERS is a joke. It's that net that's supposed to raise the red flag if people are having reactions. They don't even necessarily start counting until there is 2 million vaccines given of a new vaccine. So
they don't start counting that it is a vaccine or that there's a problem.
There's a problem.
Oh,
They wait until 2 million injections have been given before they can even predict like a pattern.
Oh, I see.
So at that point, there's 2 million guinea pigs.
Right.
So there's just a lot of, lack of regulation in that area. I think it could be developed into something really good. It's just the mechanism is broke. There's no responsibility there.
Yep.
I think it's a shame because, and the other thing I guess is like who would succumb to those type of trials anyway? I know in the past they've used soldiers. The U.S. military has been stuck like pin cushions for a really long time and
trying new things, new vaccines. Why wouldn't they use people in prison, starting with the rapists and the murderers?
Oh God, now we're getting real deep into ethics. I don't know. I just know that, vaccine companies are not held liable. I also know that our poor military are some of the people that struggle the most with anxiety and depression. And we know that vaccines get metabolized in the gut, so back to all of that we talked about before, and they don't get the help that they need or deserve either. So
yeah, you're right. So with H1N1 was this thing came, it hit, it was new, we didn't have an answer for it, we didn't see it coming, and then we rushed to create a vaccine to fix it.
Right.
And then that has some negative effects on some people because we didn't quite get it right the first time.
Right.
Then when we finally got it right, does that vaccine get introduced from there forward?
Sometimes, there's supposed to be a table or a panel of epidemiologists that get together every year and predict what's going to come around next year. But it's a little bit like predicting the weather. You're just looking at the signs, and there is a science to it, but you can get it wrong, which is why some years, they try to combine several different flus into the vaccine. Like 3 or 4, or they call it like trivalent, quadvalent is the terminology they use. But sometimes they just get it flat out wrong.
Yep.
And that happened, I think 2 years ago where everybody's like, get the flu vaccine. And the ERs are go, well, guess it didn't work, but that year nobody was demonized for, not getting the vaccine.
Yeah.
Because they were telling people early on, hey, this isn't working that well.
I see.
So
that would be for the flu vaccine. But how about for the vaccines that they give kids just because they happen to be born? Like, do the H1N1 parts of the vaccine get introduced into those vaccine protocols for kids?
No. Flu is just considered an annual optional vaccine.
Okay, so if someone has a kid today and they're just going to go through the normal vaccine schedule for that kid, H1N1 is not one of the things they're being vaccinated with.
Well,
against.
Yeah, you're offered it yearly.
Okay. All right. So to do it like by the schedule, you have a new baby, you go through the normal vaccination protocols or schedules.
Which is about 48 different things, just FYI.
Okay. And that's like in the first, generally in the first 2 years?
Yes.
Okay. So 48 different
48
things.
and within the first year. And I believe last time I looked at it, it ended up being like 72 by the last year.
72 different things by the end of that whole kind of initial.
After, about 2 years old.
Okay. So H1N1 is not necessarily part of that, but it's part of the ongoing annual flu shot?
Uh-huh.
Oh, I see.
Yep.
Okay.
So every year you would get a different, it'll be a different cocktail, based upon what they think is coming through.
The flu shot?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So last year's flu shot is not the same as this year's flu shot. and so on and so forth.
Okay. So how deadly is the flu? I guess I never took the flu that seriously. I mean, I've heard, when you say influenza, that in my mind is like, oh, that's a little bit more serious than the flu, but it's the same thing. Lots of people die annually from the flu.
Correct.
But I've never been worried about, I've had the flu before, but I've never been worried about dying from it. Is that because I didn't know enough about it, or is it because I'm generally healthy? You get the flu, you're probably going to be fine.
Well, I think that, most doctors would think it's foolhardy to not get a flu vaccine. They're looking at things other than just death too. They're looking at, how much healthcare is spent every year on people being hospitalized from the flu, doctor's offices, medications, days off work, the economic burden of the flu, so mortality rates are generally reserved for the elderly and the very young. But yes, people our age die from the flu as well. Normally it has to be kind of like a snowball effect, that likely they're getting over something else. Their immune system's weakened. They might have autoimmune dysregulation. Then they get the flu. It's generally not just going to take out a healthy person, that doesn't have anything else going on. But life is fragile. I'm learning that more and more every year. Things happen that we don't expect. And that can happen when you least expect it sometimes. And so I'm not going to just poo-poo it and be like, the flu is nothing. I also don't put all my eggs in one basket and just preach vaccine only.
Sure.
There's a lot of other things that we can do to boost our immune systems and help us not be so vulnerable. Resting is huge for T cell regulation during sick season. Get to bed. Don't stay up watching shows. Go to bed. Elderberry is really great. It's a great antiviral. Eating healthfully and taking care of your gut so you have good immune system modulation is really important. Exercising so you're sweating out all those toxins is super key. Again, that positivity, so your immune system works well is really important. There's so much to do. So we're not just saying like, get the flu vaccine or don't. There's a lot of other things that can be done.
Right.
I love using antivirals, like natural antivirals, like oil of oregano. Topically, it cuts down viral replication. So like the duration of the flu is going to be shorter and the severity of it is going to be lighter. So like there's just a lot to do and be done. To where I don't think we necessarily have to live in fear that we're just going to get taken out no matter what we do,
Right. So do you think, so nationwide, this is, what are we doing? We're recording this on April 6th. This coming week is supposed to be one of the worst weeks in America with coronavirus deaths. Do you suspect that it's going to hit Nashville at some point here? Because it sounds to me like there's promise, at least in the coming couple of weeks, not too far down the road, where this thing's going to taper a little bit and maybe start.
Yeah, they're waiting for what they call that bell curve, where it hits the top and then it starts coming down. So I don't know. I mean, it is in Nashville. It for sure is. I mean, that's why they issued the stay at home. They're trying to learn from New York and not have the same thing happen. Because I can say one thing's for sure, that we don't necessarily have a healthcare system. We have a sick care system. And so we do have a lot of autoimmune problems, and it's becoming apparent as people, in younger people even. And so that, I think, is even why we're seeing like maybe in other countries, the death rate is like reserved for the elderly. But here we're seeing some mixed numbers because our population does have problems that are normally reserved for people who are older.
Yes.
But in their, younger years.
Yep.
So I wish that our healthcare system was a little bit more prepared for this. But I think it's also a wake-up call that we need to start treating chronic disease and autoimmune disease appropriately versus, like we talked about inflammation, fibromyalgia, or arthritis. Those are considered, or lupus, those are considered autoimmune issues. Well, the treatment for that is an immune suppressant to lower the immune system's reaction to the inflammation that's happening. They're basically saying, okay, shut up, immune system.
Right.
Like, stop attacking this, you know? And so what do? Well, they lower that person's ability to fight while at the same time not treating their immune system dysregulation. It's like a double whammy.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, and then those people often have to be on pain medication, which again, decreases their ability to eliminate toxins. These people are not only are sick, but they are treated with things that make them sicker. So they are just sitting ducks.
Right.
Yes.
We were just talking about this the other day because someone sent me an article that said like 95%, I think it was high 90s of the fatalities in Italy. This is about 2 weeks ago. Of the fatalities in Italy had pre-existing conditions. So it's like, oh, that's very positive. But then when you start to read what those pre-existing conditions were, it was high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, that type of thing. And it's like, boy, you just described most of America perfectly.
Right, which used to be reserved for people who were, in a progressed age. I hate calling them old. My parents are always like, hey.
They don't like it?
No, because they're age is just a number and they act so young. They just walk and play tennis and they're crazy, making gardens, doing crazy stuff. But I hope I'm like them when I'm older. But it used to be something reserved for people who, were gray and wise. And now it's not. And I think that's the scary part for some people.
Do you think COVID-19 is exposing that then?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It's a wake-up call, I think, to our whole, again, sick care system that, hey, you cannot keep treating people this way.
The problem is it's not being treated as a wake-up call. All the attention is on COVID-19, where it came from, what it's doing, how it's spreading, how quickly it's spreading, and when are we going to get our vaccine?
Right.
That's the focus.
Right.
The focus is not on, well, geez, this is really hurting a lot more people than maybe it would have otherwise if we were paying attention to a healthier lifestyle.
And we
might miss a lesson.
It's really interesting. You might not want to post this because they might take your YouTube channel down. But integrative docs are being very censored right now. In fact, I don't know if you saw the other day what I posted, like, shame on Amazon, because they were allowing these independent distributors to sell the supplement Viracid for 3 to 4 times the amount that we sell it in office. And we know that Viracid, it's from Orthomolecular. It cuts down viral replication. I think for like a booster pack of like 10 to 12 tablets, it's like, I don't know, $15, and they were selling it for $150 on Amazon. So I posted and I was like, shame on Amazon, shame on IRL. Well, then I logged into Amazon to give them an actual review, and it said, we're sorry, your ability to review products has been basically taken away. It was within 1 minute of me posting this.
No way.
You
posted it on Instagram?
Yes.
Now you don't have a history of posting
I never review
reviews
anything.
on Amazon.
I never review anything, even when they beg me to. Like, did you love our product? I'm like, I'm not going to do that.
Wow.
I never review anything.
Yeah.
And so I got on to review it, and it said, we have taken away your rights to review, blah, 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 blah. At the same time, I was looking into algorithms because they have the WHO and the CDC, CNN reported this. Obviously not live because they want to make a big deal, but they did have a little article in a subsection down below 10 other things that the WHO and the CDC and Facebook have met together in order to, push down in the algorithm what they call quote unquote misinformation about COVID. And specifically it was about high dose vitamin C and IV vitamin C. And
about that being effective?
Yeah, they were literally
because they don't think it is effective.
I don't know. I don't know what they thought. I don't know whether they originally. I was like, what do they just not want people to know it's curable? Because obviously in China they're having great success with IV vitamin C. But,
oh really?
Oh yeah. But I don't know who it doesn't benefit. I don't know. Maybe it's like, oh man, if you tell people vitamin C works, then maybe they won't want the vaccine. I don't know. I didn't spend so much time on it, but the point is that they are definitely have control over the algorithm of what gets broadcasted and what doesn't. And right now, several integrative docs are having their Instagram pages completely shut down. Like even integrative docs posting pictures of other integrative docs showing how their accounts they can't access them.
Wow.
And so,
because of COVID-19 related content or content related to vaccines?
COVID-19.
Oh, wow.
Uh-huh.
And what are they saying that's shutting them down?
Things similar to what I said tonight.
Like take some vitamin C.
And take some vitamin C.
That's crazy.
Or the issues with chronic disease. Like there's a level of how honest you can be before people care. And they're like, okay, you said too much.
Right.
Yeah. So definitely some freedom of speech things. I don't know. I'm just kind of wondering. I'm like walking that line so finely on some of my social media platforms. It's definitely why I do recommend sometimes people, making telemedicine visits or just coming on in, because then I can be quite frank,
Right.
So
person to person, you can just say
whatever
what you
want.
Yeah, totally.
Unless Echo or Alexa's listening, and then,
Oh, they always are. They always are. And that does not shock me at all, what you said about posting something on Instagram, going to Amazon you can't review, because last summer I walked into an office of one of our guys and I said something like, what could we do instead of Cintas? And Cintas is this company that will go around and put safety equipment in, industrial buildings, and they do a bunch of other stuff, I'm sure. But so very specific. Okay. Aside from that, I wouldn't have known what Cintas was. Like, this is not a normal everyday conversation. So I walk into his office and say, there's got to be a cheaper way here. Let's look into something that we can use here besides Cintas. So he goes to Google alternatives to C, and how Google will in gray letters will pre-populate what they think you're about to type. Mm-hmm. And it pre-populated alternatives to Cintas medical something. And he screenshot it and texted it to me, because clearly, if you would go right now and Google alternatives to C, I promise you what's not going to pop up is Cintas.
Right.
It's just not going. So it clearly heard us.
Oh, yeah.
And about a few seconds later, when he typed it in, it pre-populated. Yeah. So it's not absurd to think that they caught your Instagram post and then blocked you out of Amazon.
Not. And that's all marketing and advertising, right? There's nothing sinister going on.
Right. Right.
Everybody's ethical there.
Yeah. Well, so you hope. That is tricky because, we do enjoy the algorithms when they make it easy for us to reorder something or those types of things. But it's that machine that you can use for exactly what you just mentioned.
Yeah.
It is interesting how China seems to be recovering relatively well right now.
Yeah.
I have not heard any conspiracies about this, but the thought has crossed my mind at least twice. Okay, so it originated over there. Awful. People died. It was awful. But they got a handle on it relatively quickly. And now here, a lot of the rest of the world, but certainly America, is just crippled. We are shut down. Mm-hmm. And while we are shut down, they're rebuilding, Like, is there anything that
I don't
is
know.
that pre-planned?
Yeah. I mean, we could.
I wouldn't assume so.
I
but
got a cork board out the other day and string and was going to print my little articles. And then I was like, you know what? I'd like to keep my children,
right. Yeah.
So I just did a cork board in my brain and,
Yeah.
and that was it.
You mean like piecing different bits of information together?
Yeah. I mean, have you ever seen the cork boards with like the pictures where you string, string, it's the cork board.
What do you think would be in the middle of that cork board?
Oh, I'm not going to tell you.
We want the podcast to actually air.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Well, what else are you thinking about, Jaimee? One question I was curious is, what have you been most interested in the last year, COVID-19 aside, and maybe even if it wasn't aside, that wouldn't even make the list. I'm just curious. You're always learning. You're always seeing what's coming up, what's coming out there. This is an interesting day because the one good thing is Dad is giving us so much information that we didn't have a short while ago. Mm-hmm. And I know you stay pretty well kind of on the cutting edge. Has there been anything in the healthcare community where you've been paying a lot of attention to or interested in the last few months or a year?
Yeah, I think definitely detoxing has become a really, really big topic. Like I discussed, if you don't have elimination pathways open, you get in trouble. So, I've been discussing that a lot with patients, making sure people are sweating, making sure people have bowel movements, making sure people stay hydrated so they're, flushing those toxins. Sauna is a big, topic of conversation. We just don't move and sweat enough. Like if we walked everywhere, or we were outside, working the land, working in the garden, we don't sweat enough to detox enough. So saunas are a big topic of conversation, both infrared and heat. That's I think a worthwhile topic. Mm-hmm. Moving lymph with things like dry brushing and electronic lymphatic drainage. Kim Ownby with Soma Wellness is one of the few therapists in the area that will do it. They look like wands. And she literally moves lymphs with almost like a magnetic like quality to drain when certain parts of your body aren't draining. So thermography, like that is a big thing that we're utilizing a lot, where you can scan the body. It's not like an X-ray or any sort of radiation. It uses heat, and you can see pockets in the body where your lymph flow has become stagnant, and you're starting to kind of collect fluid and toxins in certain areas, which gives us a window into maybe if your hormones are off, or if you have a dental abscess, or mold is becoming like a big thing that we're investigating in people. There's been so much flooding in the U.S., especially in the southern states. A lot of people have mold exposure and don't even know, and your DNA affects whether you actually are going to have problems with mold or not. Like both you and I could have been in a moldy house, and I have terrible symptoms and you have none. Mm-hmm. And so there's just a lot of things coming up. The integrative world is really exciting as we start to uncover things that like might not be fibromyalgia, might actually be gut dysbiosis, inflammatory foods and mold exposure, right? So like what was previously a diagnosis with a pain medication now becomes this world where we can kind of uncover maybe what's going on with patients. And that's really exciting. Mm-hmm. We are potentially doing a clinical trial under the roof of HFC, to look into like a herbal oil remedies, where people want more data. Like they want to see the numbers. They don't want to just take our good word for it. That's like a good idea. They want to see numbers and statistics and say, okay, well, is this crunchy remedy actually, can it hold up to science? Mm-hmm. And so we're going to be participating in some of that, because I do think that it's important to subject things that are seemingly healthy to to the scrutiny of science, just like I want vaccines to be.
Right.
You know, like I'm not going to say vaccines should, but we're not going to put our herbs and oils up to the scrutiny of science as well.
Right.
So I'm excited because, a few of these scientists that are working in this area have shared with me that the market is changing and people are wanting that data to make decisions on.
Right.
And so lots of exciting things are happening.
What would that look like to be involved in a clinical trial like that? And would this be the first clinical trial that you've been involved with?
Yes, because I never would do this with a medication. And so herbs and oils.
Okay. Speaking your language.
I'm all
you
about
could get involved with that.
Let's do it. Yeah. So it would look like in this particular one, they're going to give us 70 kits. And I think, I believe 35 are going to be a placebo, 35 are going to be the actual herb. Mm-hmm. And so we have people come in with respiratory symptoms. They cannot be pregnant, cannot have asthma. And, they will be given a kit with a number on it. And I won't know. So it's called a double blind. So I won't know.
Oh, right. You won't even know.
I won't know. They won't know.
Yep.
And then they go online and fill out a survey. And at the end of this, we get data that tells us whether symptoms did really improve or not.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's very cool. Yeah. And they get a Starbucks card.
So why not?
Yeah. So
I've always thought it'd be kind of cool to be involved with a clinical trial of some kind.
Well, if you get allergies or a cold in the next few months, you should come see us.
Allergies, like spring allergies?
Yeah.
Oh, I always get spring allergies.
Well, you should as soon as we launch
this. Are you doing this to potentially alleviate allergies?
Yeah.
With what?
Well, that's what you'll find out.
Okay. Now, just essential oils, or are you mixing with other things?
No, it's a product it's a combination of essential oil and herbs.
Oh, okay, gotcha. And this product is not something that you necessarily created.
No. Basically, a company who has created this product is also utilizing this researcher scientist, and they are, the middleman and. We get to we get to participate in it, which is super cool. I'm nerding out about it. Yeah.
Now, are the people that come in with symptoms, is there a wide range of symptoms you're going to try to use this
Cold,
as a cure?
Flu, allergy. So anything with respiratory, distress, this is supposed to help the structure and function of the respiratory system when it's plagued with any of these things.
I see. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Anything else you want to cover on the podcast?
Oh, man, we covered a lot, didn't we?
We covered a lot. There's tons more we could.
Oh, gosh. No, I just, I'm excited. I get excited by people who want to participate in their health. I think a misconception that I do, want to make sure people realize is that integrative health takes work. Mm-hmm. It takes more time. It's slow. Mm-hmm. It's not a fast process at all. And, even kind of like the concept, I saw somebody posting, I think it was Hopewell Farms posting about their garden. They said, this is not fast food. This is slow food, mm-hmm. And I kind of feel like that is the same thing with integrative health. It just takes conscientious decisions and choices every day. Mm-hmm. And this isn't a get well quick solution. Mm-hmm. In fact, sometimes it can be sometimes costly as you try to repair and dig out from all the years of not knowing what you didn't know. Mm-hmm. And so I don't want anybody to be fooled or not understand the timeline involved. Mm-hmm. I think, we're an instant gratification society sometimes. Right. And so when you get people who get that gratification on other levels in their life, and then they think they like the idea of integrative health, mm-hmm. but then they come to face with what it requires. Right. Then they get disillusioned. Yep. And they're like, well, integrative health didn't work for me. Mm-hmm. And so I would say if that's you and you're trying to make a decision of whether integrative health is for you, I'm definitely not going to lie and say that it doesn't actually create a little bit of upheaval to begin with. I remember when I started down this path with my son and his allergies, it was very stressful. Like I had to learn how to like rethink about food, how to shop in a grocery store, how to like shop on the perimeter and not go down all the processed food aisles and, you know, how to even cook the food when I got at home. And, you know, restaurants that we were going to eat in or not eat in. And I'm not saying like we don't ever bend or break the rules. That's not true. But I'm saying for the majority of the time, we are committing to kind of like a lifestyle.
Right.
And it is not you're going to do this for a week and you're going to be fine. So I think that's an important message that some people aren't even at a place where they can do that yet. You know, like either financially or mentally or with what's going on in their family. Like I've had people come to me who are just about ready to have a baby. They got a new job and moved. I'm like, whoa.
Right.
I'm going to try to help you a little bit, but right now might not be the best time for an overhaul. So we give them a few good decisions to make, and then we move on from there and gain some ground. But I think it's good for people to realize that this is slow going, and but I think well worth it in the end. You know, because now I don't even think I think about it too much. I just go into the store, and now it's a habit. But habits take time, right?
Right.
So anyway, I think that's an important note. That I would want to nuance for people.
Yeah. And that's my weakness too, because I do like quick fixes. But you're right, it's a lifestyle. You falling asleep over there? Our producer's falling asleep.
Hopefully our audience isn't bored.
Probably have everyone asleep by now.
Yeah.
Is it hopewellfamilycare.com?
It is, it is hopewellfamilycare.com. Yep.
hopewellfamilycare.com. Are you guys accepting new patients right now in Nashville?
We are.
You are? Okay.
Yeah.
As I know, at times you guys have been so busy, like you've had to sort of put a pause on.
Yeah, no.
But you're accepting new patients.
We were bursting at the britches, and so we had to buy a new pair of pants.
Yeah, you guys moved.
We moved.
Just in the last 18 months?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And we're pretty active right now on social media. I try to be pretty generous with the information we put out there. So Hopewell Family Care is on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok.
I thought TikTok was a dancing app.
It is, but man, if you pair like humor and dancing with medical information,
that sounds awesome.
It's a fun little mashup.
I bet.
So,
where can people see that?
Just
on
TikTok.
Instagram.
It's an app. It's its own thing.
I didn't know it was its own thing.
Yes.
I thought it was like a template that helped you do fun stuff, and then you put that on Instagram.
Thing, and it's for like a crowd even younger than you or I. So it might be why you don't know about it, but I'm doing it to even reach the younger folks. Like I even did like how to use your inhaler funny video the other day.
Yeah.
You know,
I saw that on Instagram.
Yeah. Well, so you can cross post.
I see. So TikTok's an app all of itself.
Yeah.
It's another social media app. I see.
Yes,
I didn't realize that.
And then we're just starting to be on YouTube too. We're just trying to get out there so people, because, you know, not everybody uses every platform. So you have to you have to do something that reaches all your patients on all of their ages. And
Yep. Well, that's great. Well, thank you guys for what you do. We're big fans. My wife is a huge fan. We've been so grateful so many times that we stumbled upon you guys. And so to the Nashville friends, highly recommend it. And it sounds like to people that are not in Nashville, they can get some benefits too.
They can.
With the telemed thing. And to do that, I assume they just go to your website and they can call you or email from there and get all that set up.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Great. Well, Jaimee, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.